Warrior Lore. Chapter 1160. Seal Restriction? Break it. Xiang Huangshan's face darkened as he waved his hand and signaled to his back. Then, he raised his palm. Swoosh swoosh. As Xiang Huangshan's palm fell, two figures appeared behind him, stepping on the void. Their auras exploded as their faces darkened. Their auras were sharp. One of them was at the mysterious martial honorable realm, while the other was at the nirvana realm. Both of them unleashed violent attacks as they crashed into the seal in front of them. Rumble, rumble. As the two attacks fiercely landed, a rumbling sound suddenly erupted in the sky in front of them. The space trembled as the surrounding space started to distort. Space ripples surged. However, the seal that was revealed was on the verge of collapse, but it did not shatter. The two of them joined forces to attack, but they did not even manage to break the seal. This caused the two experts from the Hahuan school to have their faces darkened. Just as the two of them were about to continue attacking, Xiang Huangshan's figure appeared in front of them. In the next moment, Xiang Huangshan's eyes suddenly became ruthless. He waved his hand, and a majestic force swept out from his palm, causing the surrounding space to tremble. In the end, it landed on the seal forcefully. Boom! On Du Xiaofu's seal, rays of light intertwined as runes flickered and turned into a light screen. Under the impact of the huge force, a crack finally appeared on the light screen. The power of the attacks rained down on Huangshan, causing the seals to tremble violently. Then, they cracked and completely shattered. Walala! The broken runes swept across the sky and almost razed the surrounding barren mountains to the ground, turning them into ruins. After the violent energy fluctuation, everything calmed down. A barren mountain appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The barren mountain had been razed to the ground, and there was an ancient stone tablet on the barren mountain. A young man in servant's clothing sat cross-legged in front of the stone tablet. His eyes were closed, and there was no aura around him. It was as though he had passed away. "He is Fudabai." Ji Ruahong cried out in alarm. She would never forget the young man in front of the stone tablet. It was the terrifying Fudabai who had killed eldermen in a single move. What is that brat doing? Could it be that the stone tablet is a treasure that contains divine abilities? Xiang Huangshan curiously looked at Du Xiaofu. He tried to observe the stone tablet from afar, but he couldn't see anything. Acting all mysterious, "Kill that brat," Xiang Huangshan shouted coldly. He motioned for a middle-aged revered martial artist to come forward and test the waters. The middle-aged man understood. The profound aura within his body surged and faint symbols flickered on his body. He slowly moved through the air and approached the stone tablet on the barren mountain. His gaze was fixed on the young man who was seated cross-legged. His expression was vigilant and cold. Pucci, suddenly, for some unknown reason, the middle-aged martial honor spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale as if he had suddenly suffered a heavy blow. His eyes also turned dull. "Quickly retreat," Xiang Huangshan shouted. His expression changed greatly, and his shout woke the middle-aged martial honor up. How strange! He is comprehending a terrifying and overbearing divine ability. Xiang Huangshan seemed to have felt something. He looked at Du Xiaofu, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the ancient stone tablet. His old face revealed a shocked expression. There is indeed something mysterious in that stone tablet. Not far away, Ji Tangjia followed Ji Sihai. The mysterious martial honor old man landed and looked at the young man who was sitting cross-legged in front of the ancient stone tablet. His eyes were filled with surprise. On the barren mountain, Du Xiaofu, who was in front of the ancient stone tablet, suddenly raised his head slightly. His tightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and two rays of light shot out from the depths of his eyes, like lightning shooting into the sky. Chi-chi. The light in his eyes shot into the sky and shook the space. Crack, crack, at the same time. The originally complicated cracks on the ancient stone tablet suddenly emitted a light and the cracks began to crack. The cracking speed became faster and faster. The light that spread out from the cracks also became more and more dazzling. It was as if it had turned into a curtain of light that enveloped Du Xiaofu's body. Boom! Suddenly, the ancient stone tablet completely cracked and turned into a pile of shattered rocks. Dust flew everywhere, and shattered rocks scattered everywhere. In the distance, everyone watched as the ancient stone tablet strangely shattered into powder. Their gazes were all fixed on the young man who was almost drowned in the shattered rocks. At this moment, as the light in his eyes shot into the sky, Du Xiaofu was still sitting cross-legged quietly. Other than his eyes that were flickering with a golden light, everything else was as if he was in a daze, pretending to be mysterious. Looking at the strange young man, Xiang Huangshan's face darkened. He did not want to delay any longer. With a deep shout, he stomped on the ground and pounced towards Du Xiaofu. Boom! Monstrous profound energy suddenly swept out from Xiang Huangshan's body. The runes were dazzling as they were released, instantly causing the sky above the Ji family to churn. A violent wind blew, and the energy pressure caused the void to tremble. Peak transcendent martial honorable. Looking at the terrifying momentum caused by Xiang Huangshan, Ji Tongjia, who was not far away, also frowned. Everything happened extremely quickly. Xiang Huangshan instantly appeared behind and above Du Xiaofu's head. With a clench of his fist, dark clouds rolled in the sky as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. A huge rune fist suddenly formed in Xiang Huangshan's hand. He directly punched towards Du Xiaofu's head. Boom! When such a terrifying fist came crashing down, waves of air surged into the sky. Terrifying energy ripples and strong winds swept out in all directions. Crack, crack, with Du Xiaofu as the center. The messy back mountain ground continuously cracked. Large cracks on the ground tore open like a bomb. At the same time, Xiang Huangshan swooped down. However, his gaze immediately changed. The closer he got, the more surprised he became. That strange young man clearly did not have any aura fluctuations, but at this moment, he felt an aura that made his heart tremble for no reason. That aura was domineering, giving people the feeling of a suppressed volcano, a bomb that had its fuse pulled, ready to explode at any time. The arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, unable to be released. Xiang Huangshan swooped down. The impact of his fist landed, causing the surroundings to explode. The wind and clouds in the sky surged, shaking the entire Tianquan city. Buzz! Suddenly, the surrounding space above the barren mountain trembled. The dazed Du Xiaofu's eyes suddenly erupted with a golden light. Golden light overflowed from his body in an instant. His hair fluttered behind him, causing thunder and lightning to overflow around the barren mountain. His aura was domineering and incomparably fierce. Du Xiaofu raised his head. At this moment, his entire person was like an erupting volcano. He opened his mouth and let out a shocking roar. Roar! As this roar came out, it was as if heavenly thunder had exploded in the ninth heaven. The roar was like a dragon roaring in the ninth heaven, like a divine elephant trumpeting, shaking the entire Tianquan city. The thunderous explosion resounded in the sky. The sound of rolling thunder reverberated in the air. Waves of sound spread out like waves of air. The vibrating space distorted violently, turning into waves of sound that spread out with the speed of lightning. This roar was like a dragon roaring in the ninth heaven, like a divine elephant trumpeting. It contained the power to move mountains and overturn seas. It was enough to cause the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack, destroying everything. It was clearly just a loud roar, but at this moment, it contained a domineering martial intent. The terrifying martial intent rushed into the sky and pierced through the void. It destroyed Xiang Huangshan's fist shadow as easily as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. This was not just a loud roar. This was already a martial intent, a terrifying martial Dao. The martial intent rushed into the sky, and the martial Dao swept through the sky. Xiang Huangshan was shocked. Endless dazzling runes erupted from his body. The aura of a peak, transcendent martial venerable in his body circulated crazily, supporting his body and resisting the terrifying martial Dao intent. The sound waves swept out and spread in front of Xiang Huangshan in an instant. They produced a strange sound of wind and thunder, like the roar of heavenly thunder. Chilala, Xiang Huangshan didn't manage to block it. That terrifying martial intent seemed to want to crush his body from the inside out. It wanted to crush his spirit gates, His profound qi went berserk, and his internal organs were on the verge of cracking. Xiang Huangshan could not help but groan. His old face suddenly turned as pale as ash. He opened his mouth and spat out blood. His body was sent flying. At the same time, the dozens of experts from the Xiang family of Haihuan school who were closer, many of whom were martial venerables. At this moment, for some reason, they all opened their mouths and spat out dark red blood. Ah! The group of joyful Union sect experts covered their ears with their hands, their expressions miserable. Those who were weaker even had dark red blood flowing out of their ears. Chapter 1161. Wherever the terrifying sound wave passed, the sound wave spread out in a circular fashion. The space trembled and the surrounding barren hills and rocks were reduced to dust. Finally, even the surrounding rocks and rocks no longer existed. Everything was reduced to ashes and disappeared. At the back mountain of the Ji family, the gazes of Ji Sihai, Ji Tongjia, and the others froze. The surroundings were replaced by a deathly silence, a strange, deathly silence. Numerous gazes moved in shock. Finally, they gathered on the young man who had already stood up. Their eyes were filled with deep shock. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the people from the Haihuan school or the Xiang family, Ji Sihai, Ji Tongjia, or the others, they all had extraordinary eyesight. The terrifying sound wave was actually so powerful that even Xiang Huangshan, who was a transcendent martial saint, was severely injured. They all felt that the heavenly gates in their bodies were about to be shattered by the sound wave. The sound wave divine ability was too terrifying. To them, the sound wave was a great divine ability. Everyone was stunned. A loud roar was able to injure Xiang Huangshan. What kind of terrifying strength was that? It's actually so powerful. Ji Tongjia could not help but exclaim from afar. If he had been a little closer, he would have definitely been affected. At that time, he would have at least been injured. And this was only being affected. Xiang Huangshan stabilized his body. Compared to Ji Tongjia's shock, the Xiang family experts from the Haihuan school behind him had ugly expressions on their faces. Their eyes were filled with shock. It was obvious that they were greatly shocked by the terrifying sound wave attack. Oh, in the crowd, Ji Ruahong's mouth was dripping with blood. Her ears were also bleeding. Her mind was in a daze. Seeing the young man injure a peak, transcendent martial saint expert of the Xiang family with a loud roar, Ji Ruahong was so shocked that her mouth opened in a circle. She did not retract it for a long time. In the strange, deathly silence, Du Xiaofu stood quietly. His body trembled slightly. His head was lowered, as if he was suppressing something. Boom! High up in the sky, wind and clouds suddenly surged, and the energy of heaven and earth gathered at lightning speed from all directions. The gathered energy of heaven and earth instantly occupied the space behind Du Xiaofu, forming a huge energy vortex. Faint lightning flashed and thunder roared, as if doomsday had arrived. Roar! At this moment, Du Xiaofu suddenly clenched his fists. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He raised his head and let out a loud roar that sounded like a dragon's roar. Rumble! At the same time Du Xiaofu roared, an aura surged from his body, and golden light immediately erupted. The frightening natural energy that lingered in the sky began to wildly pour into the tall and straight body in an instant. Walala! Under the infusion of this vigorous natural energy, the aura within Du Xiaofu's body began to surge crazily. He is breaking through. Fudabai is breaking through. Outside the barren mountain, everyone was dumbfounded. At this moment, the tall and straight youth was beginning to break through. Peak of the martial honorable nirvana realm, breaking through to the complete martial honorable realm. Xiang Huangshan was shocked to find out that the strange young man was only at the peak of the martial honorable realm at the nirvana realm. However, the terrifying roar just now had severely injured him. He is only breaking through to the complete martial honorable realm, but this aura seems to be breaking through to the chaotic origin martial honorable realm. What a vigorous and surging aura! Ji Tongxing was shocked as he felt the aura caused by the youth. Clearly, he was only breaking through to the complete martial honorable realm, But the aura was as vigorous as breaking through to the chaotic origin martial honorable realm. That stone tablet must be a treasure. Fudabai is about to break through. Ji Sihai's gaze trembled. That broken ancient stone tablet must be a treasure that contained a great power. After breaking through, that kid will be even more difficult to deal with. Xiang Huangshan's face grew darker and darker. His old face began to reveal a sinister look. That kid was already so frightening. If he successfully broke through, he would be even more difficult to deal with. I can't let him break through. Now is the best chance. A cold light flickered in Xiang Huangshan's eyes. His celestial chi surged and gushed out. Runes surged and gathered to form a huge palm print. The palm print channeled the energy of heaven and earth. Xiang Huangshan carried the palm print and violently blasted it toward Du Xiaofu. Xiang Huangshan, isn't it a little despicable to attack while someone is breaking through? Ji Tongxing gritted his teeth. Suddenly, a golden light shot out from his eyes. His figure rushed out and gathered to form a golden claw print. The imperial palace's dragon chi rippled and a dragon's roar reverberated, blocking Xiang Huangshan's palm print. Whoosh! The frightening force collided and the runes surged. Then, both of them shattered and disappeared in midair. Ji Tongxing, your Ji family is playing with fire. Seeing that Ji Tongxing was blocking him, Xiang Huangshan stared fixedly at Ji Tongxing. His low and cold voice was filled with a monstrous chill. He said to the experts of the Haohuan school and Xiang family behind him, "Stop Ji Tongxing and massacre the Ji family. Kill." As Xiang Huangshan's voice fell, dozens of experts of the Xiang family and Haohuan school immediately rushed out. Their celestial chi surged and gathered into a frightening energy frenzy, causing heaven and earth to constantly shake. In Tianchuan City, the wind and clouds surged and the world trembled violently. Countless gazes were fixed on the Ji family. There, the aura was monstrous. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. An astonishing battle was colliding. "Stop it with all your might," Ji Tongxing shouted. At the same time, several experts of the Haohuan school and Xiang family joined forces and directly trapped him. The goal of these experts of the Haohuan school and Xiang family was not to truly trap Ji Tongxing. They just wanted to stop him for a while. Even if it was just a few breaths, it would be enough. "Brat, don't even think about breaking through. Die." In the next moment, Xiang Huangshan's eyes were ruthless. Killing intent surged as his figure continued to rush out. Qila, amidst the rippling cymbals, Xiang Huangshan clenched his fist. A vigorous and sharp aura swept out, causing space to ripple violently wherever it passed. It tore through the sky and charged towards Du Xiaofu, who was in the midst of his breakthrough, with lightning speed. Chi-chi. In the blink of an eye, Du Xiaofu's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. Golden light rippled in his eyes, accompanied by lightning. "You're too late." A cold and indifferent voice came out of Du Xiaofu's mouth. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold smile. With a wave of his hand, a golden fist seal suddenly condensed and directly collided with the former. Ayo! The golden fist seal swept out. There was a faint sound of a dragon roaring in the sky and a divine elephant trumpeting. It was accompanied by mysterious runes that cut through the sky and suddenly collided with the former. Bam! The two collided with a loud bang. There seemed to be the sound of wind and thunder mixed in. The muffled sound of energy was like thunder. Walala! The moment they came into contact, the terrifying rune energy ripples swept out like a hurricane. The terrifying aura caused people to feel fear even from afar. Pff! Amidst the shockingly tyrannical energy, Xiang Huangshan, who was already heavily injured by the sound waves of the roar, spat out another mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned much paler. Tap tap. After being forced back more than 10 steps in the air, Xiang Huangshan finally stabilized his body. His cold eyes were filled with shock. Bam! As the punch was thrown out, the sound of an energy explosion suddenly came out from Du Xiaofu's divine watchtower. A powerful and surging wave suddenly swept out from Du Xiaofu's tall and straight body. Huff! Following the crazy increase in his aura, the aura on Du Xiaofu's body instantly stepped onto a new level. High up in the sky, the sound was like rolling thunder. He succeeded in breaking through. How did he break through so quickly? Feeling the aura on the tall and straight youth, the shocked Xiang Huangshan's face instantly turned ashen and distorted. Xiang Huangshan could not believe that the youth had already reached the cultivation of a martial honorable at such a young age. The speed of his breakthrough just now was also as easy as flipping his hand. In such a short time, he had directly stepped into the martial honorable realm. Xiang Huangshan did not know Du Xiaofu. If he knew that Du Xiaofu had created all kinds of miracles along the way, and that he had already killed a few extraordinary martial honorables when he was at the Nirvana realm, he probably would not have dared to come to the Ji residence. At this moment, he would have escaped without a trace. It was a pity that Xiang Huangshan did not know Du Xiaofu. At this moment, Xiang Huangshan did not realize that he was facing a terrifying person. Walala, as he broke through and stepped into the martial honorable realm, the vigorous heaven and earth energy in the sky descended like a storm and surged into Du Xiaofu's body. Then, everything calmed down. In an instant, the aura on Du Xiaofu's body was several times stronger than before he broke through. Extraordinary martial honorable peak, someone from Hawan school. Feeling everything in his body, Du Xiaofu smiled. His eyes were filled with golden light, accompanied by flashes of lightning, purple flames, and twinkling stars. Chapter 1162. Crack. After that, Du Xiaofu even stretched lazily. The bones in his body crackled like firecrackers exploding. His smile was frightening, but there was a chill in it. You do have some strength, but you're still only a perfected martial venerable. Do you really think that you can do anything to me, who is at the peak of the exceptional stage, just because you're a perfected martial venerable? After the shock, Xiang Huangshan took a deep breath. It seemed that he still had something to rely on. His eyes turned cold again as he spoke to Du Xiaofu coldly. Du Xiaofu stretched lazily and raised his head slightly to look at Xiang Huangshan in the sky. His eyes smiled faintly, and the disdain and provocation in his smile was self-evident. He said in a low voice, "Killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. Brat, you're courting death. No matter who you are, you must die today." Xiang Huangshan was extremely angry. He was so angry that he laughed. Dazzling runes and Xian Qi surged out from his body. His hand seals were quickly formed. His feet kicked the air, and at the same time, his figure flew out. He waved his hand and finally gathered 3 ferocious flood dragon illusions, directly pouncing towards Du Xiaofu. 3 dragons' secret art. Xiang Huangshan shouted gloomily. The 3 flood dragon illusions rushed into the sky. This was the Hahuan school's ultimate move, and also one of his trump cards. Ao ao ao. The 3 flood dragon illusions rushed out, their roars shocking the heavens. They formed a 3-legged formation, bringing with them an earth-shattering energy as they rushed towards Du Xiaofu. Looking at the 3 flood dragon illusions that were extremely powerful, Du Xiaofu smiled. He did not retreat at all. Instead, he directly attacked with a tyrannical stance. A golden light flashed in his eyes. With a flip of his palm, Du Xiaofu flicked his sleeve. Golden runes flickered, and a tyrannical aura swept through the sky. In the end, it gathered into the golden wings of a great pong, fiercely crashing into the 3 flood dragon illusions. Chi la la, under the domineering golden light, the 3 flood dragon phantoms seemed to be naturally suppressed. Their fierce eyes revealed fear, and the stalemate did not last long before they all exploded. The energy runes scattered in all directions, and the space became chaotic, as if it wanted to shatter this space. As the monstrous energy dissipated, Du Xiaofu's figure also appeared in midair, standing against the wind. His hair danced in the wind as he stared at Xiang Huangshan in front of him. Traces of coldness filled his eyes. Ha 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 ha, do you really think that my Ji clan will allow anyone to do as they please? Now, I'll play with you. Not far away, Ji Tongju looked at Du Xiaofu, who had already broken through, and laughed loudly. Ji Tongju sneered as he stared at the Hahuan school and Xiang clan's martial venerables who were blocking him. He also released his transcendental martial venerable aura. The imperial palace's draconic chi surged, and the draconic roars were unceasing. Ji Tongju continued to attack. Instantly, the revered martial artist from the Hahuan school and the Xiang clan were forced to retreat, leaving them in a sorry state. Ding ding. The three flood dragon phantoms were shattered by the opponent. Xiang Huangshan's face revealed a serious expression. The young man's cultivation was clearly only at the peak of the martial honorable realm, but his strength was too abnormal. Even the strongest person in the younger generation of the Hahuan school would not be a match for him. When Xiang Huangshan heard that his descendant had been crippled in a single move, and that eldermen had also been killed in a single move, he had some doubts. He was afraid that someone was exaggerating. How could there be such a terrifying person in the younger generation? Even the descendants of the true dragon and true tiger were not that terrifying. At this moment, Xiang Huangshan finally understood that what he had heard was not exaggerated. The young man in front of him was indeed abnormally strong. If I don't kill this kid today, it will be even more difficult to take revenge in the future. He will also become a huge problem. A ferocious expression crawled onto Xiang Huangshan's old and pale face. A monstrous red light erupted from his body. The red light turned into talisman runes that enveloped Xiang Huangshan's body. Then, a terrifying and violent force was emitted from his body, activating his martial vein. It was filled with violence and ferocity. Human Emperor Martial Vein. Du Xiaofu looked at Xiang Huangshan's martial vein with interest. Then, his gaze suddenly changed. As Xiang Huangshan's martial vein was activated, the aura on his body suddenly began to surge violently. In the end, it actually climbed to the level closest to the chaotic element martial honorable realm. It was probably at the level of a fake chaotic element martial honorable rumble. As the aura surged, the space around Xiang Huangshan rumbled. The red talisman runes covered the surface of his body. His face became ferocious, like a ferocious beast. The energy of the world around him surged, and he was even constantly devouring the energy of the world around him. What a strange martial vein. It can actually increase one's strength. Looking at Xiang Huangshan, whose strength had soared, Du Xiaofu was surprised. It was the first time he had seen such a strange martial vein. Little brother, be careful. Xiang Huangshan's martial vein is the berserk martial vein. It can increase one's cultivation base and increase one's strength greatly. His attacks will also become more and more violent, and his body will also become more tyrannical. However, all of this will only last for a short time. Just as Du Xiaofu was surprised, Ji Tongjia's voice came from the distant battle circle. Violent martial vein. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. This violent martial vein was really special. Kid, I'll let you know the power of my violent martial vein. Xiang Huangshan roared angrily. Killing intent surged in his eyes. Accompanied by a violent aura, he suddenly rushed towards Du Xiaofu. Swish, a scarlet rune, like a scarlet lightning bolt that contained death, rushed out from Xiang Huangshan and rushed towards Du Xiaofu. Qi. The berserk scarlet light landed in Du Xiaofu's eyes. Facing Xiang Huangshan, whose strength had increased greatly after activating the violent martial vein, Du Xiaofu did not dodge. The golden light in his eyes was intimidating, and with a wave of his right hand, a golden claw condensed and tore through the air. In the next moment, the golden claw tore through the air and fiercely collided with the scarlet lightning bolt. Swish! A crisp sound of something tearing through the air rang out, accompanied by the explosion of the fiery runes. The invisible space was torn apart, and circles of broken runes rippled out in all directions at an astonishing speed. Swish! Amidst the berserk energy, Xiang Huangshan's defense seemed to have increased explosively. He violently rushed out, waved his hand, and a series of fingerprints flew out. Swish, 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 swish. Streaks of scarlet fingerprints, like a berserk scarlet lightning bolt, exploded in the air. They were incomparably fierce and quickly enveloped Du Xiaofu's vital points. Even Du Xiaofu was a little surprised by the speed and ferocity of the finger imprints. However, this did not cause any confusion for Du Xiaofu. Along the way, he had faced countless experts and encountered countless dangers. This kind of change did not affect Du Xiaofu. Swish! The golden light receded a little, and starlight energy rippled around his body, forming a starlight screen in front of him. The runes flickered, and the starlight screen was like a river of stars falling in front of Du Xiaofu. It was gorgeous and dreamy, and it directly absorbed the berserk energy. The berserk and fierce fingerprints swept into the starlight screen, as if they were swept into the vast river of stars. A moment later, they disappeared without a trace, not even leaving a trace. What a strange defense. Is it the power of the stars? Seeing Du Xiaofu's strange power of the stars, Xiang Huangshan revealed an astonished look, and his ferocious face slightly froze. Is this all you've got? Du Xiaofu stood in the air, looking at Xiang Huangshan with a smile. The starlight receded, and the golden light on his body was domineering. Brat, don't be complacent too early. Being ridiculed by Du Xiaofu, Xiang Huangshan's face became more and more ferocious. He was enraged to the extreme. The mysterious runes on his body flickered strangely, and the resplendent runes swept out from his body. The brilliance filled the air, covering the sky and the sun. It looked quite terrifying. Without a doubt, at this moment, Xiang Huangshan was enraged to the extreme by Du Xiaofu, and he was about to use his strongest strength. Oh, war! The resplendent runes lingered on Xiang Huangshan's body. Then, outside the Ji residence, under the countless astonished gazes of the entire Tianquan city, it transformed into a gigantic ancient wolf that occupied the sky. The gigantic wolf's body was thousands of feet long, and its entire body was covered in dim red scales. Its eyes were ferocious and cruel, and the sharp fangs in its bloody mouth sent chills down one's spine. When the gigantic wolf's figure stepped into the sky, the aura of the entire Tianquan city became violent and ferocious. The wind and clouds surged high in the sky, and even the heavens and earth trembled. What kind of demonic beast is that? When the gigantic wolf's figure appeared in the sky above Tianquan city, waves of terrifying energy affected the heavens and earth, causing the entire Tianquan city to tremble in fear. A series of gasps could be heard. Ancient violent blood sky wolf. Du Xiaofu looked at the gigantic wolf's figure and felt a terrifying and ferocious aura. It was a powerful demonic beast from the wolf clan, and it was the king of the demonic beasts of the wolf clan. It was rumored that in ancient times, there was an expert from the violent blood skywolf clan who had even battled with a real tiger. They were extremely violent and ferocious. Brat, let's see how arrogant you can be. Xiang Huangshan laughed sinisterly as he stimulated the arterial spirit and assisted the martial vein's power. At this moment, he was using his full strength. Even a real chaotic element martial honorable would have to retreat if they encountered him. Xiang Huangshan did not believe that he could not even take down a brat who had just broken through to the complete martial honorable realm. Oh, war! The violent blood demon wolf's figure raised its head and howled. It was like a living creature as it pounced towards Du Xiaofu. A red light exploded from the violent blood demon wolf's figure. Its gigantic body was like a meteorite as it charged down. Its ferocious mouth swallowed everything, causing the surrounding space to distort like a red black hole. Energy rippled wildly, causing people to feel a chill just by looking at it. Chapter 1163. Qilal. The berserk energy descended from the violent blood demon wolf and enveloped Du Xiaofu's surroundings. Bang, bang, bang. Within the range of the violent blood demon wolf's aura, the ground at the back of the Ji family's mountain exploded. The mountain peak collapsed and the boulders were crushed into powder. Even the ground caved in. The cracks on the ground crazily spread in all directions like a spider web, causing the buildings of the Ji family in the distance to crack and collapse. So strong. Ji Tongjie, who was suppressing the experts from the Hahuan school and the Xiang family, could not help but suck in a breath of cold air for Du Xiaofu when he felt Xiang Huangshan using his full strength to activate his meridian spirit. He looked at each other in shock. Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes as he looked at the ferocious mouth of the violent blood demon wolf. His eyes narrowed, but he remained indifferent. Kid, you must be scared silly. It's over. Xiang Huangshan sneered as the huge violent blood demon wolf rushed down. Under the shocked gazes of Ji Tongjie and the countless people outside Tianquan city, the ferocious mouth directly swallowed Du Xiaofu. It was like a red black hole that enveloped Du Xiaofu. Hula la! The energy of heaven and earth around Du Xiaofu was also swallowed. The surrounding red light spread, causing people to feel a chill. That youth was swallowed by the demon wolf? In Tianquan City, many people gasped as they looked at the sky above the Ji family. How could this be? Ji Tongjia's eyes were filled with doubt as his heart trembled. TSK, you overestimate yourself. Xiang Huangshan sneered as he stepped into the air. However, just as he finished speaking, his pupils suddenly shrank as if he had sensed something. He immediately looked towards his meridian spirit. Qi-La, just as Xiang Huangshan's pupils shrank, the ferocious violent blood demon wolf violently trembled as its eyes revealed a pained expression. On the surface of the violent blood demon wolf's illusory body, a golden light continuously spread out. The golden light became brighter and brighter, bringing with it the power of heaven and earth. A terrifying pressure descended. Xiang Huangshan's expression changed greatly. The sinister sneer on his face quickly disappeared and was replaced by shock. At this moment, Xiang Huangshan could feel a terrifying power erupting within his violent blood demon wolf bloodline soul. Impossible! How could this be? That brat has only just broken through to the peak of the martial revered realm. Xiang Huangshan couldn't believe it. But no matter how much he didn't believe it, it still happened. His meridian spirit started to crack, and golden light burst out. Oh! Suddenly, a dragon's roar reverberated in the sky and shook the clouds. In the next instant, a huge golden dragon burst out from the violent blood fiend wolf's huge illusory body, rushing straight into the sky. The violent blood fiend wolf's phantom shattered inch by inch, turning into broken runes that scattered in the sky. The golden dragon soared through the sky, shuttling back and forth in the clouds, its shadow majestic and ferocious. The golden dragon's illusory figure shone brightly, accompanied by the power of heaven and earth. An inexplicable pressure of heaven and earth descended upon Tianquan City, causing all the living beings in Tianquan City to feel weak. Under that kind of pressure, billions of living beings couldn't help but feel reverence and prostrate themselves. The golden dragon circled, then slowly shrank, turning into 100 feet long. Du Xiaofu's figure stepped into the void, within the circling golden dragon. His eyes opened, and a golden light flickered in his eyes. The terrifying power was like an erupting volcano. The Imperial Palace's Dragon Qi. What a rich Imperial Palace's Dragon Qi. Ji Tongjia looked at the sky, his eyes trembling. He could clearly feel that terrifying aura. It was a type of Imperial Palace's Dragon Qi. The Imperial Palace's Dragon Qi on Fu Debai's body was far above his. It was a world of difference from the Imperial Palace's Dragon Qi on his body. The power of heaven and earth made him tremble. Puqi, his meridian soul was shattered, and Xiang Huangshan spat out blood. Looking at the young man wrapped in the golden dragon, his pupils constricted to the extreme, and shock and fear surged in his eyes. Xiang Huangshan couldn't imagine that his strength, which was close to that of a chaotic element martial venerable, was unable to do anything to a young man who had just broken through to the peak martial venerable realm. How would Xiang Huangshan know that Du Xiaofu had too many methods to destroy his meridian soul? Whether it was the golden-winged rock's beast energy, the purple gold heavenly palace, the mountain meridian soul, or the thunder martial vein, they could all easily destroy his meridian soul. However, Du Xiaofu didn't do that. The devil religion existed in Kyushu, and at this moment, the divine light court and the devil religion must still be searching for him. The golden-winged rock's beast ability, the purple gold heavenly palace, the thunder martial vein, and the mountain meridian soul were all absolutely eye-catching. Once the news spread, it would be very easy for the devil religion to find him. Therefore, Du Xiaofu used the Imperial Palace's Dragon Qi on his body to gather the barren nation's luck and channel the power of heaven and earth. It was enough to destroy Xiang Huangshan's meridian soul. Fu Debai is fine. What terrifying strength! In Tianquan City, countless people originally thought that Fu Debai was dead for sure. At this moment, after this unforeseen event, they raised their heads in shock, and all of them gasped and trembled. Violent martial vein, violent blood demon wolf meridian soul, you don't have any more tricks. With a sweep of his long sleeve, the golden dragon on his body turned into a golden light and returned to his body. Du Xiaofu smiled at Xiang Huangshan in the void in front of him. That smile made Xiang Huangshan suddenly feel a chill in his heart. Kid, do you think you can do anything to me? After the fear and shock, Xiang Huangshan's face turned sinister once again. Berserk violent profound armor. A dazzling red light spread out from Xiang Huangshan's body. At this moment, a wave of violent energy surged out from Xiang Huangshan's body and wrapped around his body, turning into a protective armor that wrapped around his body. On this protective armor, a red light flashed and shook the void. The Berserk violent profound armor was formed by Xiang Huangshan's violent martial vein. It had a terrifying defensive power, and it was difficult for people of the same cultivation level to break it. This was also Xiang Huangshan's undefeatable trump card. Kid, I already have an undefeatable power. Even if I continue to exhaust you, I can still exhaust you to death. Under the cover of the Berserk violent profound armor, Xiang Huangshan was as sinister as a demon. He was at the peak of the exceptional martial revered realm. If he continued to exhaust his opponent, he would be able to exhaust him to death. Chi. As soon as he shouted, Xiang Huangshan attacked again. His figure was like lightning, and the red light was like thunder. Under the gazes of many people in Tianquan City, outside the Ji residence, Xiang Huangshan's hand formed a palm print again. The red light talisman engravings burned brightly with a black light. The sky was filled with violent energy, and the talisman engravings swept out like a storm. With a shocking fluctuation, it directly slapped towards Du Xiaofu. Roar. This terrifying palm print was also a powerful martial technique of the Hahuan school. The ancestors of the Hahuan school had comprehended it from the mysterious bones of ferocious beasts. Within the palm print, the black light fluctuated, as if there was an ancient ferocious beast roar. It's time to end this. Looking at the terrifying palm print crushing towards him, Du Xiaofu slightly raised his head. The golden light in his eyes suddenly fluctuated strangely, and a terrifying domineering aura shot out from his body, instantly enveloping his entire body. An indifferent and cold voice came from Du Xiaofu's mouth. Next, try my domineering way. Boom. As soon as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, a terrifying aura spread out from his body, shaking the void. It was as if the wind and thunder were roaring, and the aura surged and shook the void. At the same time, Du Xiaofu raised his head and let out a loud roar, rushing towards the sky. Roar. This roar was like a dragon roaring in the 9 heavens, like a divine elephant trumpeting. The sound waves swept out like a tsunami, surging in all directions, causing the surrounding heaven and earth to tremble violently. Roar, 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 roar. At this moment, the entire void rumbled, and countless echoes of the roar reverberated in the firmament. The echoes of the sound waves were also extremely domineering, like a chain of thunder from the 9 heavens that reverberated throughout the world. This shocking roar was so loud that it could shake the heavens and earth and make ghosts and gods weep. The void was on the verge of collapsing, causing one's heart to tremble in fear. Rumble. The surging sound waves, accompanied by the energy ripples of the golden runes, spread out like a surging ocean, causing the entire sky above Tianquan City to tremble rapidly. Amidst the loud roar, there was an all-pervasive sound wave that entered one's ears. For no reason, it transformed into a strange and domineering martial Tao, causing the profound qi in one's body to involuntarily boil uncontrollably. Their divine gates were about to explode, and their primordial spirits were about to explode. It was as if a bomb had been thrown into a calm lake, and when it exploded in the deep water, it would eventually stir up huge waves that were thousands of feet high. The sound waves reverberated high in the sky, and all the living beings in Tianquan City trembled. Their eyes were filled with pain, and their bodies could not help but explode from the inside out. What a terrifying sound wave attack! It contains a type of martial Tao. There were also extraordinary people in Tianquan City. At this moment, under the terrifying sound waves, they were deeply shocked. The sound waves were not simple sound waves, but contained a type of martial Tao. That martial Tao was like the sword intent of a sword expert, or the saber intent of a saber expert. At this moment, Xiang Huangshan, who was the main target of the sound waves, had a palm print that was swept away by the sound waves and shattered into pieces in the void. In the center of the sound waves, the crimson runes in Xiang Huangshan's body trembled, and his eyes revealed a painful and ferocious expression. It looked as if something was about to rush out of Xiang Huangshan's body. Crack, crack. Following that, a crisp, cracking sound resounded in the echoes. Crack, crack. At this moment, all eyes were fixed on the sky with a swish sound. At this moment, the berserk profound armor that covered Xiang Huangshan's body began to crack. A look of despair surged from the depths of his eyes. A violent energy that came from the inside of his body was like a suppressed volcano that was about to erupt at any time. Chapter 1164. Who are you? At the final moment, before Xiang Huangshan's despairing eyes and his voice completely sounded, the wild and violent volcano-like energy within his body could no longer be suppressed. Finally, it exploded. Bang! Bang! The explosion reverberated, and the entire void of Tianquan City trembled. Shattered energy storms were everywhere in the air. Crash, crash, crash. A monstrous energy aura swept out, causing one's soul to tremble. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. Brat, I'll never let you go. Amidst the terrifying aura, a resplendent talisman rune shot out like lightning, and Xiang Huangshan's resentful voice could be heard. It was Xiang Huangshan's primordial spirit. At this moment, his primordial spirit had escaped a calamity and was rapidly fleeing. You're not strong enough to escape with your primordial spirit. Du Xiaofu moved, and a cold smile crept onto his resolute face. Killing intent surged from the curve of his smile, and a silver thunderbolt suddenly shot out from between his eyebrows. Crackle! The silver thunderbolt pierced through the void, and a vast and mighty pressure descended. The appearance of that pressure caused Xiang Huangshan's primordial spirit, who was rapidly fleeing hundreds of feet away, to suddenly become sluggish and tremble. Then, under the countless gazes of Tianquan City, Xiang Huangshan's primordial spirit was struck by the silver thunderbolt. He immediately let out a mournful wail that made one's hair stand on end, and then shattered into resplendent runes. The silver thunderbolt wrapped around Xiang Huangshan's shattered primordial spirit and returned to Du Xiaofu's glabella at lightning speed. Elder Xiang is dead. Run. In a short moment of shock, the dozens of people from the Hahuan school and the Xiang family who came with Xiang Huangshan regained their senses. They no longer dared to tangle with Ji Tongjia, Ji Sihai, and the other experts of the Ji family. Each of them wished they could grow a pair of wings and quickly soar into the sky to escape. Many demonic beast mounts flapped their wings and soared into the sky, quickly leaving as well. Du Xiaofu's eyes were overflowing with killing intent. The enmity with Hahuan school had long been formed. At this moment, it was even more irreconcilable. Instead of letting these people go, they might have a chance to deal with him and the people around him in the future. It would be better to eliminate them completely. Since you're here, then don't leave. As Du Xiaofu spat out these cold words, he swept his hand across the space in front of him. In an instant, a purple brilliance gushed out from the void, as if it was seeping out from the void. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of fleeing Hahuan school students, the Xiang clan students, and their mounts, from the weakest to the weakest, began to emit a crimson-purple light. Pong, pong, pong. Then, their bodies exploded one after another, like gorgeous purple fireworks exploding above Tianquan City. Walala. A scorching aura swept through the air, causing one's skin to burn and one's soul to burn. Walala. Purple splendor poured down, but under that splendor was a destructive power. The dozens of people from the Hahuan school and the Xiang family were all experts. However, at this moment, their souls were destroyed in an instant, and not even their corpses were left. Huff, huff. The entire Tianquan City froze as they looked at the tall man in midair. Then, the sound of people inhaling cold air rose and fell one after another. Countless gazes were filled with deep shock and astonishment. On the mountain behind the Ji clan, the expressions of all the Ji clan experts froze on their faces. Oh my God. Ji Sihai could not help but exhale a breath of cold air from his mouth, and his eyes were filled with shock. For some of the Ji clan experts, it was hard to imagine that a person who had just stepped into the complete martial honorable realm could kill a peak martial honorable realm expert. What kind of concept was that? Moreover, it was just a loud roar, but it was so terrifying. Gulp. The Ji clan martial honorable realm mysterious old man swallowed a mouthful of saliva in his throat. Xiang Huangshan is dead. Ji Tongjie sighed softly as he looked at the tall young man who was floating in midair. At this moment, he also felt fear. Ji Tongjie thought that even if his strength was not weaker than Xiang Huangshan, he was definitely not stronger than Xiang Huangshan. Huff! In midair, Du Xiaofu floated in midair, feeling everything in his body. After a while, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Walala! An ancient aura swept out from his tall and straight body. His robes fluttered, and his hair fluttered behind his back. His aura shook the surrounding space. I have finally stepped into the complete martial honorable realm. A slight smile appeared on his face. As his voice fell, dark chi flickered under Du Xiaofu's feet. Then, his figure landed on the ruins of the barren mountain, which was in a mess. The ground had already sunk into a deep pit. The third ancient stone tablet that Du Xiaofu accidentally came across had already turned into dust and disappeared. The first stone tablet is power, the second stone tablet is being, and the third stone tablet is qi. Power is external, and qi is internal. Let's call it the path of dominance. A smile appeared on Du Xiaofu's resolute face as he muttered, "There should be a fourth ancient stone tablet. I wonder when we will encounter it." Fudabai, this is bad. Something big has happened. A clear shout came from the Ji clan. A beautiful figure flashed and rushed to the back of the mountain. After a few flashes, she rushed in front of Du Xiaofu. Lil Wan, what happened? Du Xiaofu's face turned serious. The person who rushed over was Lil Wan. Lil Wan's face was grave and anxious. When she saw Du Xiaofu, she panted and said hurriedly, "Dabai, something big has happened. Miss has been taken away." Hearing Lil Wan's words, the expressions of the surrounding Ji clan experts changed. The mist that Lil Wan mentioned was naturally Ji Jian. Lil Wan, what happened? Didn't you accompany Miss to the Xinyuan Empire? Ji Sihai's face changed, and he immediately asked. Miss had finished absorbing the Imperial Dragon energy in the Xinyuan Empire's palace. Just as she was about to return home, a mysterious woman appeared in the palace and took Miss away. Lil Wan panted and said, the Xinyuan Empire was one of the 7 empires controlled by the Ji clan. There was a Ji clan expert who was the emperor. That was in the palace. With the protection of the Imperial Dragon energy and the assistance of the heavens and earth, how did that person take Jian away? The martial honorable realm mysterious realm old man asked Lil Wan with a grave expression. Ji Jian had already absorbed the Imperial Dragon energy in the palace. With the protection of the Imperial Dragon energy in the palace, no matter how strong her opponent was, it would be difficult for them to take her away in the palace unless they were extremely powerful. However, if the Ji clan had offended such a powerful expert, they would have been massacred long ago. There was no need for them to capture a junior of the Ji clan. Lil Wan replied, that beautiful woman was too strong. Miss wasn't a match for her. Even the emperor of the Xinyuan Empire wasn't a match for her. That beautiful woman seemed to only be there for Mississippi. After capturing Miss, she left. Who dares to touch my Ji clan? The martial honorable realm mysterious realm old man was enraged. Ji Jian was already the family head of the Ji clan. It wouldn't take long for her to become a powerful expert and lead the Ji clan to become even stronger. Now that she was taken away, it was obvious that she was targeting the Ji clan. Big White, hurry up and save Mississippi. Lil Wan was anxious and her face turned pale as she watched Miss being taken away. She was too weak to do anything. She could only rush back to the Ji clan and place her hopes on the young man in front of her. Du Xiaofu didn't say a word. He clenched his fists tightly and looked up. His gaze swept across the disciples of the Ji clan, who were gradually gathering around him. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu's gaze landed on a charming lady in a red dress. This lady was Ji Ruahong. When she saw Xiang Huangshan and the other experts of the Xiang clan and the Hahuan school being killed, She was scared out of her wits. Ji Ruahong didn't know whether to leave or not. Just as she was wondering what to do, she suddenly felt the gaze of the malefic star. She was immediately frightened out of her wits. Oh no! Seeing that gaze, Ji Ruahong, who was already shocked and overwhelmed with shock, immediately started to panic. Then, her body started to tremble, and she immediately started to flee. You better tell me if you did it. Space fluctuated. Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in front of Ji Ruahong like a ghost. His expression was cold. The experts of the Haohuan school had come to the Ji clan. Ji Jian had also been taken away. Ji Jian and the Ji clan didn't have any other enemies. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but suspect Ji Ruahong. If the Ji clan had offended such a super expert, the Ji clan would have been massacred long ago. A super expert wouldn't go so far as to deal with a junior of the Ji clan. Feeling the invisible tyrannical aura of the malefic star in front of her, Ji Ruahong's soul trembled. She panicked and her body trembled uncontrollably. Under absolute fear, everything collapsed. Ji Ruahong no longer dared to hide anything. It has nothing to do with me. I wanted to take Ji Jian away. The sect master sent me, an elder Xiang, to deal with you before taking Ji Jian away. It's possible that the sect master sent someone to take her away, but I can't be sure. This has nothing to do with me. With a trembling voice, Ji Ruahong stared at the resolute face in front of her, only to see that his expression was growing colder and colder. In the depths of that pair of clear and bright eyes, she could feel a terrifying killing intent gushing out like a tidal wave. Lowly slave, I can't let you live. The cold and indifferent voice fell into Ji Ruahong's ears. In the end, her pupils constricted as she saw the young man's palm strike directly at her. Xiaoyu, continue to write. Today, continue to explode. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for your support. Chapter 1165. Du Xiaofu waved his hand. Golden light surged from his palm, and a terrifying force erupted. Bang! The golden light exploded, and Ji Ruahong's body turned into a bloody mist. The surrounding Ji family members looked on coldly, and some sighed. No matter what, the Ji family had raised him. Who would have thought that in the end, Ji Ruahong would lead people to destroy the Ji family? Her death was not worth regretting. After killing Ji Ruahong, Du Xiaofu had withdrawn quite a bit of the killing intent in his eyes. However, the chilliness still caused the surrounding air to be covered in ice. He frowned slightly, looked at Ji Tongjia and asked, "Where is the He Huan sect?" "We're heading southeast. With little brother's speed, you should be able to reach there in 5 to 6 days. Ji Tongju looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "If little brother wants to go to the Haohuan school to look for Jiyan, let this old man accompany you. I have some faith in the Haohuan school. Perhaps the Haohuan school will not make things difficult for Jiyan on account of me. If the Haohuan school will really give face to the Ji family, I'm afraid they won't take Jiyan away. It will be more convenient for me to go alone. The Ji family should prepare to deal with the Haohuan school. The Haohuan school will not let this matter rest so easily." As soon as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, his figure flashed and turned into a rainbow. In a flash, he disappeared from the spot. Ji Tongju looked at the disappearing figure with a grave expression. "Ancestor, we've interfered this time. So many people from the Haohuan school have died. I'm afraid they won't let this matter rest." Ji Sihai retracted his gaze from the direction where Fong Kong had disappeared. He looked at the raised mountain behind the Ji family with a grave expression. So many experts from the Haohuan school had died in the hands of the Ji family. How could they let this matter rest so easily? If we don't interfere, the Ji clan won't be any better off. The Xiang clan and the Fei clan won't let the Ji clan off easily. I haven't been able to advance for a long time, and I'm afraid that I won't have much time left. Ji Tongju sighed lightly and spoke in a soft voice. At that time, once I reach the end of my lifespan, the Ji clan will be swallowed up by others. I'm only interfering in this matter now because I want to give the Ji clan a chance. That young man's relationship with Jiyan isn't shallow, and his talent is terrifying. He is definitely not an ordinary person. This time, that young man has also benefited from our Ji clan, which means that he owes our Ji clan a favor. If one day he stands at the peak of Shangzhou, even if our Ji clan has declined by then, as long as Ji Yin is in our Ji clan will be able to rise again and surpass our current state. Hearing this, Ji Si Hai and the mysterious martial saint old man revealed shocked expressions. They inwardly exclaimed that their ancestor was indeed not an ordinary person to be able to see so far ahead. It could be said that his eyes were extremely sharp. 3 days later, deep in the mountains, the sun was setting in the west, and thick layers of clouds occupied the sky. Streaks of crimson light shot out from the gaps in the sky, rolling with golden scales. Gradually, night fell. At the border between the sky and the water, the sun was setting in the west, but there was still a faint red glow. On the mountain peak, Du Xiaofu stood quietly. He rushed to the Hahuan school, and along the way, he had to inquire about little Xingxing. At night, Du Xiaofu planned to rest and recover. Going to the Hahuan school to find Ji Jian made Du Xiaofu's heart heavy. He faintly felt that this matter wasn't normal. If the Hahuan school wanted to deal with the Ji clan, they could definitely send experts to suppress them. There was no need to capture a junior. Moreover, the Ji clan was still a subordinate force of the Hahuan school. What is the purpose of the Hahuan school? Du Xiaofu was puzzled and couldn't understand. He didn't know what the Hahuan school's motive was. He guessed that if Ji Jian was really in the Hahuan school, she shouldn't be in much danger at the moment. However, regarding the Hahuan school's reputation, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but worry about Ji Jian. Along the way, Du Xiaofu also inquired about the Hahuan school's reputation. The Hahuan school was both good and evil. Although the Hahuan school didn't do anything evil, many of the Hahuan school's cultivation techniques were related to the relationship between a man and a woman. They also required the pleasure of intimacy. It was rumored that the disciples of the Hahuan school were more open-minded about the relationship between a man and a woman. This caused many orthodox people to stay away. At the mention of the Hahuan school, some women's faces turned pale. However, the Hahuan school had many experts and was one of the top forces in Shangzhou. It was comparable to the top forces in Shangzhou. Therefore, not many people dared to provoke the Hahuan school. Let's go to the Hahuan school first. I hope nothing bad will happen. Du Xiaofu took a deep breath and set up a seal on the mountain peak. Then, he sat cross-legged and began to breathe. After a while, Du Xiaofu's body was enveloped in a layer of faint golden light. From afar, he looked domineering and intimidating. Du Xiaofu had just broken through to the martial venerable realm and needed to stabilize his cultivation. This time, Du Xiaofu had comprehended the third ancient stone tablet and comprehended the qi. He also needed to stabilize it. The stone tablet contained a vast amount of qi. Comprehending it thoroughly was not something that could be done in a short period of time. The qi was formless. It passed through the acupoints and circulated the innate great circulation. The essence of all things in the world flowed towards the divine watchtower and gathered. It gathered the 5 things into one. Cultivation of knowledge, the killing intent of the heavens and earth, the principles of yin and yang, and the wonderful use of true skills. Qi came from the inside to the outside. Force came from the outside, while qi came from the inside. Du Xiaofu could feel that the Tao of profundity contained in the 3 ancient stone tablets that he had comprehended so far complemented and had a direct connection with each other. However, he did not know how many of these ancient stone tablets there were in the world and who had left them behind. However, Du Xiaofu could imagine that if these ancient stone tablets were really left behind by someone, the person's strength must have reached a terrifying level. As the golden light enveloped him, Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit directly devoured the power of Xiang Huangshan's shattered primordial spirit with the help of the silver net soul-devouring thunder. Although the primordial spirit of a peak transcendent revered martial artist could not be compared to the primordial spirit of an 8-star talisman master under normal circumstances, it was definitely not weak. The silver net soul-devouring thunder and Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit had already merged into one. At this moment, it was devouring the power of Xiang Huangshan's primordial spirit, causing Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit to grow at an astonishing speed. 2 days later, in the morning, the first rays of the morning sun rose gently, and the morning clouds came out of the mountains. On a vast mountain range, the peaks were shrouded in the morning sunlight. The vast and boundless mountains stood on the horizon. Everyone in Shangzhou knew about the Xinyuan mountain range. The Hahuan School was located in the Xianyuan mountain range. It was said that the enormous Xianyuan mountain range covered an area of hundreds of thousands of miles. There were several huge cities in the Xianyuan mountain range. The Hahuan School was located in the middle of the Xianyuan mountain range. Yuanxi City was a huge city at the entrance of the Xianyuan mountain range. When Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in the city, it was early in the morning. Outside the city, the mountain range spat out a ray of light that enveloped the entire city. The light was dreamy and illusory. Whoosh whoosh. Yuanxi City was already bustling with people in the early morning. The Hahuan School selection has begun. This is a rare opportunity. As long as you can be selected to enter the Hahuan School, your future will be limitless. It's not easy to enter the Hahuan School. In addition to having extraordinary talent, the men have to pass the test of physique and appearance. The women have to pass the test of appearance and figure before they can enter. This is a rare opportunity for the Hahuan School to select disciples. We can't miss it. In Yuanxi City, there was a hubbub of voices. Many figures flew in a certain direction. The Hahuan School is recruiting disciples. Du Xiaofu looked at the crowd on the street and frowned slightly. Suddenly, he shifted his gaze and followed the crowd. The central square of Yuanxi City was crowded with people. Most of them were young men and women. The oldest among them were 25 or 26 years old. The youngest was only 14 or 15 years old. Many of the young men and women were accompanied by their elders. In the middle of the square, there were many young men and women in gorgeous clothes. They were in high spirits and looked arrogant. They were all disciples of the Hahuan School. The young men and women around the square were envious and in awe. There were also many powerful people in the Hahuan School. They were testing the young men and women who were queuing up to enter the Hahuan School. Du Xiaofu was also in the queue. He restrained his aura. The first test is to test your 5 senses and physique. Those who don't pass will be eliminated. This is to avoid damaging the reputation of the Hahuan School. The second test is to test your talent. Only those who pass both tests will be able to enter the Hahuan School. In the square, people from the Hahuan School spoke from time to time. They looked around at the young men and women who were queuing up to be tested. The queue moved slowly. Some people were happy about the test results, while others were worried. Only 2 or 3 out of 10 young men and women could pass the first test. Du Xiaofu was a little nervous about this test. If it was just a test of talent, Du Xiaofu was definitely not afraid. With the cultivation level of the people from the Hahuan School in the square, he could pass with some tricks. However, the test of physique and 5 senses made Du Xiaofu nervous. It was his first time encountering such a test. If he couldn't pass, wouldn't it prove that he was ugly? After an hour, it was finally Du Xiaofu's turn to be tested. The person who tested Du Xiaofu for the first test was a woman in her 30s. She was charming and had a charming look in her eyes. Her cultivation level could not escape Du Xiaofu's prying eyes. She had reached the mysterious level of a 5-star talisman master. How old are you? Where are you from? What's your name? Did you join any sect? Chapter 1166. The woman asked Du Xiaofu. At the same time, she pinched Du Xiaofu's face and looked at it carefully. Then, she patted Du Xiaofu's body a few times and said in surprise, "Your physique is not bad, 22, from Yuanxi City, Fu Xiaodu. Never joined a sect." Du Xiaofu replied casually without leaving any trace. "You look good too. Pass." The woman nodded and signaled Du Xiaofu to line up at the side to wait for the second round of talent assessment. "Looks like I'm also a handsome man." Du Xiaofu heaved a sigh of relief and a smile appeared on his shameless face. The second round of talent assessment was no stranger to Du Xiaofu. Not many of the young men and women waiting in line could pass, less than 1 in 10. Those who could pass were divided into martial cultivators and talisman masters. In comparison, talisman masters were extremely rare. Of the hundreds of people who had their talent assessed, only 30 to 40 were able to stay in the end. However, there were a few young men and women who were extremely talented. It was Du Xiaofu's turn to be assessed. It was a middle-aged man who had just reached the martial king realm. He was assessing for Du Xiaofu. The talent assessment mainly focused on early martial veins and spiritual soul power. Du Xiaofu restrained his aura and released some of his primordial spirit power, turning it into ordinary spiritual energy. This allowed his talent to barely reach the level of a spiritual root. This talent was enough to enter the Hahuan school. 4-star spiritual talisman master at the peak of perfection. Your talent is close to a spiritual root. Pass. After the middle-aged man who had just reached the martial king realm finished the assessment, he nodded at Du Xiaofu. 4-star spiritual talisman master at the peak of perfection was very likely to break through to 5-star spiritual talisman master. This was already not low. This made the middle-aged man's expression become gentler and more polite. Swish swish. After the words of the middle-aged man who had just reached the martial king realm, many envious gazes immediately fell on Du Xiaofu. There were even many young women whose eyes were secretly shining. The examination in the square lasted for about 6 hours. Nearly 20,000 young men and women lined up for the test, but in the end, only 200 to 300 people passed. Those who were eliminated could only return home disappointed. Many boys and girls, young men and women, were talented and had the qualifications to pass. Unfortunately, they did not pass the test in terms of their youthful looks and physique. In the end, they were unable to enter Hahuan school. Congratulations on joining Hahuan school, but you are not considered Hahuan school's disciples yet. This time, Hahuan school will be selecting disciples, and Yuan Shiqing is only one of them. Many other qualified disciples from other places are already waiting at Mount Cloudy Rain. You will enter Mount Cloudy Rain in 3 days. Only after you complete the final training can you officially join the Hahuan school. Those with outstanding results will directly become inner disciples of Hahuan school. At that time, they will receive the best cultivation resources in Hahuan school. A beautiful woman looked at the hundreds of people who passed the test and said, "This beautiful woman was also the woman who originally tested Du Xiaofu's physique and facial features." Her charming eyes swept across Du Xiaofu intentionally or unintentionally. "It would be great if I could become an inner sect disciple of Hahuan school. I heard that the inner sect disciple of Hahuan school not only has a higher requirement for talent, but the men must also be handsome and the women must be beautiful." As soon as the beautiful woman finished speaking, many young men and women who passed the test discussed in low voices. They were all looking forward to becoming an inner sect disciple. Dusk, in Yuanxi City. Gu Wu. Several huge flying demonic beasts soared into the sky and carried the qualified boys and girls, young men and women, to Mount Cloudy Rain. Du Xiaofu sat on the back of a Beast Lord Realm White Jade demonic eagle. It was specially arranged by the beautiful woman who originally tested him to sit on the White Jade demonic eagle. Under the setting sun, the flying demonic beasts flapped their wings and flew past the clouds, bringing along a flash of sunlight. "Fu Xiaodu, come here. I have something to ask you." The beautiful woman sat cross-legged in front of the White Jade demonic eagle. She waved at Du Xiaofu, who was among the dozens of new disciples who were sitting at the back. Du Xiaofu was sitting cross-legged. When he heard her, he secretly shifted his gaze. He had no choice but to stand up and walk forward. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Deacon Lu." The beautiful woman in front of him was called Lu Chui. She was the deacon of Hahuan school. Du Xiaofu already knew about her. This time, the strongest person from Hahuan school who came to recruit new disciples in Yuanxi City was a protector. She had already reached Nirvana Realm, Martial Royal Realm. "I have something to ask you." Lu Chui looked at Du Xiaofu. She sized up Du Xiaofu with her gaze and smiled. "Sit down and talk." When Du Xiaofu heard her, he had no choice but to sit cross-legged beside Lu Chui. On the back of the White Jade demonic eagle, there were dozens of young men and women. When they saw that Du Xiaofu was valued by Deacon Lu Chui, their eyes were instantly filled with envy and jealousy. "This time, you are a disciple recruited by Yuanxi City. You must complete the training well. When the time comes, if you pass the training and even become an inner sect disciple, we will also have glory." Lu Chui looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "I will work hard." Du Xiaofu nodded. However, he was puzzled in his heart. He did not know what Lu Chui was thinking. "Don't tell me she wants to do something to me." Du Xiaofu had long heard that Hahuan school maintained an extremely open attitude towards relationships between men and women. He immediately became alert. He was not that kind of person. "That's good. Lu Chui nodded. Her eyes intentionally or unintentionally swept across the other Hahuan school disciples on the back of the flying demonic beasts. Then, she looked at Du Xiaofu and said, I see that you hit it off very well. I am very happy. How about this? You call me elder sister from now on and I will recognize you as my younger brother. When the time comes, with elder sister's connections in the Hahuan school, it will not be a problem for me to let you join the Hahuan school. Is she trying to tempt me? Don't tell me she really wants to do something to me. I am really not that kind of person. Du Xiaofu muttered in his heart. He could not help but become vigilant. However, Du Xiaofu's expression did not leave a trace of surprise. He looked as if he was overwhelmed by the favor and replied to Lu Chui, Thank you, Deacon Lu. Silly brother. You still call me Deacon. Lu Chui smiled charmingly. Her slender hand gently patted Du Xiaofu's shoulder. Then, intentionally or unintentionally, she gently swept her hand across Du Xiaofu's chest. Thank you, elder sister Chui. Du Xiaofu's entire body trembled, but his expression remained calm. He smiled as if he was overwhelmed by the favor. Good boy, my good brother. However, you still haven't gone through the final trial of the Mount of Clouds and Rain. If others know about our relationship, I'm afraid it won't be good. If there are outsiders, you should still call me Deacon. Do you understand? Lu Chui lowered her voice. Her eyes were filled with charm. It was as if she wanted to eat him up. This disciple understands. Du Xiaofu nodded. Little brother is so smart. Elder sister didn't misjudge you. Consider this a gift from elder sister to little brother. This is a spirit concentrating pill. It can increase the strength of one's spirit and soul by a lot. It is a perfect spirit-grade pill. Lu Chui stuffed a pill into Du Xiaofu's hand. Her slender fingers took the opportunity to gently draw a circle on Du Xiaofu's palm. Thank you, elder sister. Du Xiaofu pretended to be pleasantly surprised, but his heart couldn't help but tremble. No need to thank me. Elder sister also has a matter to trouble little brother with. I just don't know if little brother can help elder sister a little. Lu Chui looked at Du Xiaofu with a smile. So there really is an ulterior motive for giving benefits. Don't tell me you really like me. Du Xiaofu's eyes darkened. He solemnly vowed, Elder sister's matter is my matter. I will definitely do my best. Haha, little brother's words are enough. Lu Chui smiled. She stuffed a handkerchief into Du Xiaofu's chest without leaving a trace. She even took the opportunity to gently pinch Du Xiaofu's chest. Lu Chui lowered her voice and whispered into Du Xiaofu's ear, Little brother, when you enter the Cloud Rain Mountains this time, only new disciples like you can enter. Normally, there will be restrictions. 10 years ago, when I joined the Hahuan school to train, I found a spirit ice lotus in a cave. However, it hadn't bloomed back then, so I couldn't pick it. Looking at the time, it should be about right now. This handkerchief contains the map inside. Elder sister has already marked it. When the time comes, just pick it and give it to elder sister. Remember, don't let anyone know. As long as little brother completes this task for elder sister will definitely treat little brother well. With that, Lu Chui's eyes became gentle. She stared at Du Xiaofu with a hint of teasing. It was enough to make any man lose control. I will definitely complete it. Elder sister, don't worry. Du Xiaofu nodded and pretended to be expectant. However, he was speechless in his heart. He was a complete martial honorable and a complete 8-star talisman master. Now, he was actually more teasing than a 5-star talisman master. He couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. Good little brother. I knew you were my good little brother. Lu Chui was overjoyed. She was very happy. Then, she told Du Xiaofu all the things to take note of in the Cloud Rain Mountains. There were many talisman arrays in the Cloud Rain Mountains. There were also many demonic beasts. The Hahuan school also left many Hahuan school cultivation techniques in the Cloud Rain Mountains. There were high and low cultivation techniques. Only disciples who found the cultivation techniques and successfully walked out of the exit could officially become disciples of the Hahuan school. Chapter 1167. Aside from having to face the seal arrays and monsters, these disciples also had to be wary of their fellow disciples as they trained. Hahuan school did not leave too many cultivation methods in the Cloudy Rain Mountains, so there was bound to be competition. Hahuan School also did not have any restrictions on competition. The next morning, the first light of dawn shone. A vast mountain range stood in front of the flying monsters. The dreamy dawn rose from the eastern horizon, forming a huge arc of light around the mountain range. We've arrived at the Cloudy Rain Mountains. 2 days later, you will be arranged to enter the Cloudy Rain Mountains. At that time, you will have to rely on yourselves. The flying monsters landed in front of the mountain range as the leading Hahuan School guardian elder spoke to the group. After that, some young Hahuan School disciples who had been waiting here for a long time led the group into a square. As they left, Lu Chui gave Du Xiaofu a look. Her eyes were filled with charm, causing Du Xiaofu to shudder inwardly. There was a sizable square in front of the mountain range. At this moment, there were already close to 20,000 disciples sitting cross-legged and waiting. They were all young men and women. The many disciples of Yuanxi City were also sitting cross-legged in the square, waiting together. Kid, this position is not suitable for you. Go somewhere else. Just when Du Xiaofu was sitting down cross-legged and waiting, an arrogant shout resounded. Then, for young men and 2 young women around the age of 22 or 23 surrounded him. The leader was a young man in luxurious clothes, but he was very attentive to one of the young women beside him. This young woman was quite beautiful. Her large eyes had a natural charm that seemed to be able to steal souls. Men would take a few more glances at her. Du Xiaofu glanced at these people and asked calmly, "I like this place. Is there anything else?" "Brat, do you not understand human language? You better get lost. Don't think that you're so great just because you're related to Deacon Liu. Miss Yichio's cousin is an inner sect disciple of the Hahuan School. With Miss Yichio's talent, joining the inner sect will be a piece of cake. You better know your place," the finely dressed young man said coldly, as if he was deliberately targeting Du Xiaofu. He had long since noticed that the young man in front of him had established a relationship with Deacon Liu, causing him to feel jealous. Pa. However, before the young man could finish his sentence, a crisp slap covered his voice. Then, a red and swollen palm print appeared on his face. PFFF. The finely dressed young man spat out a mouthful of blood and 2 of his front teeth were smashed. His expression changed drastically. "Brat, you dare to hit me, Pa." The finely dressed young man covered half of his face. Just as he spoke, another slap landed on the other half of his face. The crisp sound of the slap reverberated and alarmed many of the surrounding disciples. They're already fighting? It looks like the Cloudy Rain Mountain will definitely be lively. Some of the Hahuan School's official disciples also noticed the dispute. Many young men and women raised their heads and glanced at it indifferently. However, they did not pay any attention to it. Instead, they watched the commotion from afar. "Is there anything else?" Du Xiaofu asked indifferently as he stared at the finely dressed young man with his 2 slaps. Looking at Du Xiaofu's gaze and hearing his calm voice, the miserable finely dressed young man trembled. His legs went weak. He did not dare to stay any longer and immediately retreated. The charming girl called Yichio looked at Du Xiaofu. Her charming eyes narrowed as she retreated as well. After the small disturbance subsided, some of the surrounding young men and women moved slightly and quietly put some distance between themselves and Du Xiaofu. None of them wanted to provoke this fierce young man. Such a small situation naturally did not affect Du Xiaofu at all. He quietly sat down cross-legged. All sorts of discussions could be heard from all around the square. Du Xiaofu listened quietly. They were all about training in the Cloudy Rain Mountain and joining the Hahuan School. However, amidst the discussions, Du Xiaofu heard that there were many talented disciples among the disciples recruited by the Hahuan School this time. Among them, there was a young man with the talent of a human emperor. His cultivation was also at the martial emperor realm. He came from a large family clan and had specially joined the Hahuan School this time. He had already been selected as an inner sect disciple. Even the grand elder of the Hahuan School wanted to take him in as a disciple. Many people were envious of him. I wonder if Jijian is in the Hahuan School. Du Xiaofu was worried. At this moment, he was still wasting time. But besides using this method to enter the Hehuan sect, there was no better way. With the power of the Hahuan School, Du Xiaofu knew that it was impossible for him to force his way into the Haohuan school with his current cultivation and strength. Let's comprehend. Du Xiaofu took a deep breath. There were still 2 days. He could take the opportunity to comprehend the various beast energies and profound meanings in his body. Time passed very quickly. During these 2 days, there were a few more groups of young disciples that came and waited at the square. 2 days passed very quickly. When the first ray of dawn appeared on the eastern horizon 2 days later, many auras in the square woke up one after another. Huff, huff, auras woke up one by one. Pairs of eyes shone in the dawn. Many people looked nervous and expectant. Huff, Du Xiaofu exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi. He opened his eyes and a faint golden light flickered. Then, it disappeared and turned into a clear light. Rumble. After a while, a huge restriction opened not far in front of the square. Pay attention to the talisman arrays and demonic beasts inside. Find the cultivation techniques of the Haohuan school. The levels of the cultivation techniques are different. In the future, you will be cultivating the cultivation techniques of the Haohuan school. This is a form of training for you. Only after you have been trained can you officially enter the Haohuan school. The exit will open in 10 days. At that time, the disciples who find the cultivation techniques will become official disciples of the Haohuan school. Those who don't can only stop here and return home. Now, you can enter. An old man from the Haohuan school said to the crowd outside the restriction. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone could hear him clearly. Swish, 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 swish. As soon as the old man finished speaking, more than 20,000 young men and women rushed into the entrance. Although the auras of 20,000 people weren't strong, when gathered together, it was still quite powerful. As more and more figures entered the restriction, the entrance gradually disappeared. Every new disciple has to train in the cloudy rain mountains. Although this kind of training is rather cruel, why does the Manchu place cultivation techniques inside? If the talented disciples start off with a low-grade cultivation technique, their talent will be affected even if they have the chance to cultivate a high-grade cultivation technique in the Manchu. A middle-aged man said to the old man at the entrance of the restriction. The old man looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Don't underestimate the cloudy rain mountains." According to the legends of the Manchu, a supreme expert once descended on this mountain range a long time ago. It's very likely that he left behind a treasure or inheritance. That's why the ancestors of the Haohuan school built the Haohuan school here. It's a pity that the Manchu hasn't been able to find the treasure. However, it's rumored that if that supreme expert left behind a treasure, it's most likely on the cloudy rain mountains. However, the Manchu's experts haven't been able to find it after countless years. Now, everything has become a legend. I see. I never thought that the cloudy rain mountains would have such a legend. The middle-aged man was astonished and surprised when he heard that. That's not all. I heard that the Manchu's ancestors left behind a tier cultivation technique in the cloudy rain mountains so that the younger generation could continue searching for the treasure left behind by that supreme expert, the old man said as he looked at the middle-aged man. Only those who had reached a certain status in the Haohuan school would know about this. Ordinary Haohuan school disciples would never be able to come into contact with such information. Tier cultivation technique? The middle-aged man and several other Haohuan school experts with high status were stunned when they heard that. They knew very well what a tier cultivation technique represented. It was an existence that only existed in legends. The old man was extremely satisfied when he saw everyone's reaction. He smiled faintly and said, "Strictly speaking, it should be a peak earth tier cultivation technique. It complements a spirit talisman master cultivation technique that only the headmaster of the Haohuan school can cultivate. Rumor has it that when the two cultivation techniques are combined, it will become a tier cultivation technique." The old man paused for a moment and sighed softly. It's a pity that since ancient times, no one has been able to find the inheritance left behind by that supreme expert. Even our Haohuan school's own cultivation technique has not been found. If we can combine them into a tier cultivation technique, our Haohuan school will definitely be able to take another step forward. Du Xiaofu's figure swept through the cloudy rain mountains. He scanned his surroundings and disappeared from where he stood. A moment later, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in a quiet forest. He took out the handkerchief that Lu Chui had given him. There were a few simple lines drawn on the handkerchief, outlining a topographic map. There were markings on a mountain range that seemed to indicate a destination. Is there really a spirit ice lotus? Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. The spirit ice lotus was extremely attractive to spirit talisman masters. It was a treasure even for a 6-star spirit talisman master. Chapter 1168. However, with Du Xiaofu's current cultivation, the temptation of the spirit ice lotus wasn't too great. However, in order to make things more convenient in the Hahuan school, it was necessary to obtain the spirit ice lotus for Lu Chui. Looking at the location marked on the handkerchief map, Du Xiaofu confirmed the direction and immediately moved to his original spot. In order to prevent the super experts of the Hahuan school from secretly monitoring him, Du Xiaofu had been restraining his aura. He didn't dare to reveal his true cultivation and didn't dare to move too quickly. Although Du Xiaofu encountered a lot of demon beasts along the way, their levels weren't too high. As soon as they sensed Du Xiaofu's aura from afar, those demon beasts automatically ran away. They didn't pose any obstruction to Du Xiaofu. Is this a cultivation method from the Hahuan school? In the cave of a beast lair on a mountain peak, a few demonic beasts fled in panic, leaving behind a pile of glowing spirit herbs and a cultivation technique, jade slip. Du Xiaofu hesitated for a moment before probing with his mind. Crackle! A talisman script on the jade slip suddenly glowed brightly. A dazzling talisman script energy instantly swept into Du Xiaofu's forehead, causing Du Xiaofu to slightly close his eyes. Yin and Yang are in harmony, and life is endless. If one is missing, then nothing can be born. Solitary Yin doesn't produce itself, and solitary Yang doesn't form itself. Thus, heaven and earth are enshrouded, and all things turn into alcohol. Men and women make love, and all things are born. The Tao is used every day, and the true origin is repeated, and Yin and Yang are reversed. If a person can refine it, they can transcend life and death. Although a man's body is filled with Yin, if he cultivates by himself, how can he return to his origin? Thus, when a great cultivator seeks the innate true origin, he must seek it from a place where Qi is given birth to the body. Only then can he obtain the innate true origin Qi and return to his origin in heaven. A string of runes fell into Du Xiaofu's mind. A moment later, Du Xiaofu opened his eyes, which contained some fluctuations. From the manual, Du Xiaofu learned that this was a set of Hahuan School's entry-level manual. It was also a dual cultivation manual. It focused on the connection of male and female yin and yang, refining qi into spirit, refining spirit back into emptiness, refining one's own foundation, eliminating all distracting thoughts, and advancing together. This cultivation method also allowed Du Xiaofu to have a better understanding of Hahuan School. When most people mention the Hahuan School, they would immediately think of the word perverted. From this technique, Du Xiaofu learned that this was not the case. This dual cultivation technique allowed the two of them to progress step by step, from low to high, from shallow to deep. They could refine themselves, combine medicine, and finally be reborn. For dual cultivators, the first step was to cultivate one's nature. The second step would be to refine one's vital essence to cultivate one's life. The second step would be to cultivate one's younger brother. However, this dual cultivation technique was indeed related to the relationship between male and female. Du Xiaofu did not care about this dual cultivation technique, nor did he plan to cultivate it. He was just curious and wanted to understand it a little. After putting away the spirit herbs in the monster's nest, Du Xiaofu used his body to sweep across the sky. A few hours later, under a huge rock, Du Xiaofu obtained another Hahuan School manual. He curiously opened it, and a bright light shone. A string of runes swept across his brows, and the dazzling light made him close his eyes slightly. This Tao is not the Tao. Life root, life and death aperture. It's ugly in words, but wonderful in deeds. Everyone hates it, but everyone laughs. The key is reversed. Don't hate it, don't fuss about it. If he came, there would be immediate results. Heaven and earth are peaceful, a good sign. Mouth to mouth, aperture to aperture. Swallow it, and you will know. New seedlings, an innate sign. Examine the eyebrows, and go against the Tao. Dregs, and continue to grow. Both of these things were wonderful. When it's time to act, let people call. Qi must be strong, and spirit must not be wasted. If it doesn't work, let people call. If they are serious, old or young. If they don't speak, don't speak. These methods are compatible with the great Tao. Essence, qi, and spirit are immortal herbs. Complete in silence, report in the light. Ride the phoenix, listen to the heavenly edict. The light faded. Du Xiaofu closed his eyes slightly and slowly opened them. His gaze was stunned. It's really explicit. Du Xiaofu learned from this manual that this Hahuan school manual was completely a dual cultivation manual. It was extremely explicit and open. No wonder the Hahuan school's disciples were all seductive. However, Du Xiaofu carefully pondered for a while. This manual did indeed have some wonderful aspects. The manual mentioned that the essence of yin and yang was not strong, and cultivating this method alone was a win-win area. The essence of yin and yang was the essence of yin. The essence could give birth to lambs, and lambs could give birth to gods. Nothing in Rongwei's life was greater than this. When the oil dried up, the lamp extinguished, the marrow exhausted, the man died. The essence of yin was the essence of one's body. The dual cultivation manual was not to make people feel dirty, but to let people see through their lust and lust. It was to purify the seeds of greed, to truly leave greed in the heart, and to attain supreme wisdom. Therefore, the true essence of the dual cultivation manual was not for lust, but for faster and more thoroughly cutting off lust. It was to surpass desire and desire. Only some unorthodox dual cultivation manuals or evil dual cultivation manuals would focus on lust. There were even some vicious evil people who cultivated the art of plucking yin to nourish yang and plucking yin to nourish yang, which could kill many people. Such vicious and evil dual cultivation manuals were forbidden and shameful even in Hahuan school. With these manuals, Du Xiaofu learned more about Hahuan school. It was no wonder that Hahuan school had a place in Shangzhou and was comparable to the top forces. It was both good and evil, and good was more than evil. Therefore, Hahuan school was able to settle down in Shangzhou. If Hahuan school was really evil and vicious, it would have been eliminated by the top forces under the banner of eliminating evil and protecting the good. Whoosh! After a while, Du Xiaofu continued to leave. All the training that Hahuan school's new disciples in the Mount of Clouds and Rain was useless in front of Du Xiaofu. On the evening of the fourth day, Du Xiaofu suppressed his slow speed and finally found the place marked by Lu Chui on the handkerchief map. A group of towering peaks appeared in front of Du Xiaofu. The peaks stood tall and gave off an ancient aura that was difficult to see through. It seems to be in front. Du Xiaofu probed with his mind. Under the effect of the mountain vein spirit, he immediately felt the fluctuation of spiritual herbs not far away. The target on the handkerchief map was also in the same direction. The peaks were connected to each other, and there was a long canyon that was covered with withered vines and moss. It was dark as if it had never seen the sun. Along the canyon's abyss, the walls on both sides became narrower, and water dripped down from the cliffs. After a while, rays of light gradually appeared in front of him, and energy fluctuations were unceasingly fluctuating. Poochie, Poochie. Suddenly, the front of the canyon was swept by a flapping of wings. Countless blackbirds flew into the sky above the canyon like bats. They were densely packed, numbering in the tens of thousands. At the place where the countless birds spread their wings and flew away, a huge cave appeared on the rock wall. Densely packed green vines were hanging all around the cave, and a white light was faintly discernible. There was a cold aura coming out of the cave, as if there was an ice cellar inside the cave. It is indeed the aura of the spirit ice lotus. Du Xiaofu raised his eyes and looked at the cave on the rock wall. His figure immediately flew into the cave. The interior of the cave was a completely different world, and it was huge. Inside the cave, the surrounding walls were flowing with water, and the cold aura made one's heart tremble. After going 100 feet into the cave, the cold aura became denser, and the white light was dazzling. On a huge cliff, there was a dense patch of white spirit vines. Layers of leaves were like white jade ice, and in the middle, there was a flower that was about the size of a palm. There were 27 petals, and they were sparkling and translucent like ice jade. They were rippling with an aura that made one's soul fluctuate. Hiss! Suddenly, on the spirit vines in front of him, a white cold light swept towards Du Xiaofu as fast as lightning. It carried a dazzling light, cold aura, and a majestic aura. Swish! Du Xiaofu was not surprised. He had already seen a demonic beast hiding on the cliff. With a wave of his hand, a stream of energy swept out. Bang! The silver-white scaled long snake slammed into the cliff, causing the cliff to crack and debris to fall. It was a silver-white scaled long snake that was about 20 feet long. Its eyes were cold, and it flicked its tongue, revealing a ferocious gaze. It was releasing the aura of the Beast Lord realm, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of its mouth. I want this spirit ice lotus. I don't want your life. You can go find another opportunity. Let's go. Chapter 1169. I want this spirit ice lotus. I don't want your life. You can go find another opportunity. Let's go. Du Xiaofu gazed at the silver-white scaled snake. His eyes were filled with a faint golden brilliance, releasing a faintly discernible domineering and intimidating aura. Hiss hiss. The silver-white scaled snake seemed to have sensed something as fear gushed out from its ferocious eyes. It lowered its head in submission and quickly dashed out of the cave. Spirit Ice Lotus. Only then did Du Xiaofu carefully size up the Spirit Ice Lotus. If a perfect 6-star soul symbol master were to consume it, it would increase his soul strength by quite a bit. It was a treasure of a soul symbol master. Chi. With a sweep of his hand, Du Xiaofu plucked the Spirit Ice Lotus. Although the Spirit Ice Lotus was a treasure of a soul symbol master, Du Xiaofu had many treasures on him that were much stronger than the Spirit Ice Lotus. Thus, he did not care too much about it. In order to conveniently inquire about Ji Jian's situation and whereabouts in the Hahuan school, Du Xiaofu could only give this Spirit Ice Lotus to Deacon Lu Chui. After storing the Spirit Ice Lotus in his storage pouch, Du Xiaofu turned around and left. Chi! The instant Du Xiaofu turned around, the spirit vines that had just plucked the Spirit Ice Lotus instantly withered and strangely turned into withered leaves. Du Xiaofu stopped in his tracks and turned around to take a look before continuing to leave. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu seemed to have discovered something as his eyes trembled. Chi. Then, Du Xiaofu's figure suddenly appeared in front of the stone wall, covered by the withered spirit vines. Hula! With a flick of his sleeve, a wave of air rushed out. Du Xiaofu waved his hand and swept away the densely packed withered vines, revealing a stone wall filled with runes. On the path of cultivation, strengthening one's body, increasing one's lifespan, and seizing one's ability are all in defiance of the heavens. The heavens and earth are heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. The supreme beings are heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. Obeying the heavens does not necessarily mean that defying the heavens is laughable. A preface was inscribed in front of the stone wall. Du Xiaofu's gaze suddenly constricted, and he was shocked to the point his jaw dropped, unable to retract it. He was flabbergasted and seemed to be in disbelief. He's really lucky. He's been searching high and low for something, only to find it by chance. Moments later, Du Xiaofu's astonished face was replaced by a pleasantly surprised expression. He stood in front of the rock wall and stared at it as if he was in a daze. He did not even blink for a long time. Several hours later, in Du Xiaofu's eyes, the characters on the rock wall suddenly began to fluctuate, as if they were alive. Walala! These characters began to fluctuate slowly, as if they were forming a vortex on the rock wall, emitting a faint light. There's a reaction. Du Xiaofu raised his head and revealed a grin. He didn't hesitate in the slightest to take a stride forward, and then faint golden profound energy surged out from his palm before he directly touched the glowing vortex of characters. Chi-chi, something strange happened. The profound energy in Du Xiaofu's palm was immediately devoured by the glowing vortex of characters, and he could not control himself. The endless profound energy in his body began to be devoured by the vortex of characters on the rock wall. Du Xiaofu was not surprised at all by this situation. He had encountered this situation before in the ancient sky sect. Crack, crack. In just a short moment, a slight cracking sound could be heard from the rock wall. Du Xiaofu's eyes revealed joy. The profound energy in his body continued to pour into the vortex of characters, and the profound energy in his body poured out like a flood. The light emitted by the vortex of characters on the rock wall became more and more dazzling, as if something was about to erupt. An extremely domineering aura descended, and then cracks covered the entire rock wall. At this moment, the dazzling light became more and more dazzling, causing Du Xiaofu to have no choice but to close his eyes. Swish! Just as Du Xiaofu closed his eyes, the vortex of characters on the rock wall exploded. A wave of rune light quickly left the rock wall and shot out, directly enveloping Du Xiaofu's body. The dazzling vortex of light enveloped Du Xiaofu, and a resplendent rune directly shot into the center of Du Xiaofu's brows, entering Du Xiaofu's mind without any obstruction. Ah, the light entered his mind, as if it brought with it a huge amount of information, causing Du Xiaofu to let out a miserable cry, as if his mind was about to explode. Heaven and earth are heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. Sovereigns are heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. Following the heavens does not mean that defying the heavens is laughable. On the path of cultivation, going against the heavens is impossible without great perseverance and perseverance. The Tao of heaven and earth uses yin and yang to create all living things. Heaven and earth, the sun and moon, thunder and lightning, wind and rain, male and female, hard and soft, movement and stillness, manifesting and restraining. All living things are divided into yin and yang. Taiji refers to the origin of qi before heaven and earth were separated. Taiji gives birth to yin and yang give birth to the four divisions. The four divisions gather in the black and yellow, stabilizing the 8 directions and suppressing all living things. At the same time, a domineering and old voice resounded in Du Xiaofu's mind. To be able to enter the divine seal left behind by this emperor is enough to prove that you have great perseverance and perseverance. You also cultivate a domineering cultivation technique, which is why you have the fate to enter this emperor's divine seal and obtain the black and yellow 4-division seal. The black and yellow 4-division seal has 1 seal, Xiaoyang, 2 seals, Xiaoyin, 3 seals, Taiyin, and 4 seals, Taiyang. The 4 seals can be cultivated individually or superimposed to multiply their power. When the 4 seals are combined, the black and yellow emperor seal is formed. It is enough to suppress all living things and move mountains and seas. I will leave you the 3rd seal of the black and yellow 4-division seal, the Taiyin seal. If you are fated, you will be able to obtain this emperor's true teachings in the future. The domineering and old voice then slowly disappeared from Du Xiaofu's mind. At this moment, there was a dazzling symbol in Du Xiaofu's mind. It was a martial arts cultivation technique. The 3rd seal, Taiyin seal, can be cultivated individually or superimposed to multiply their power. Du Xiaofu stood in front of the cracked rock wall. He opened his eyes and a smile appeared on his face. He had obtained the 1st seal of the black and yellow 4-division seal, the Xiaoyang seal, in the ancient heaven sect. Now, he had obtained the 3rd seal, Taiyin seal. Du Xiaofu had already known the power and dominance of the black and yellow 4-division seal. To cultivate the Xiaoyang seal, one could only cultivate this martial arts technique if they did not have a domineering cultivation technique. Otherwise, they would suffer from qi deviation. The black and yellow 4-division seal was very difficult to cultivate. It was not an ordinary martial arts technique, but a martial arts technique that contained the profound meaning of heaven and earth and the mysteries of yin and yang. However, this martial arts technique was different from the ancient stone tablet that contained the domineering sword principle, the domineering fist principle, and the domineering qi principle. The ancient stone tablet that contained the domineering fist principle, the domineering sword principle, and the domineering fist principle contained more profound meaning. However, the black and yellow 4-division seal contained the profound meaning of heaven and earth and the mysteries of yin and yang. In the end, it was more used in power and martial arts. Compared to ordinary martial arts techniques, it was completely unique. After obtaining the 3rd seal, the moon seal, Du Xiaofu naturally had no reason not to cultivate it. With the experience of cultivating the Shaoyang seal, Du Xiaofu was able to cultivate the lunar seal in the cave much faster than he had imagined. Qila, 2 days later, in the cave, Du Xiaofu's hand seals were formed. A strange and violent energy fluctuation suddenly rippled out from the cave. As Du Xiaofu's hand seals were formed, the energy fluctuation around his body became even more violent. Traces of silver-white energy suddenly seeped out from the void. Finally, the silver-white energy wrapped around the surface of Du Xiaofu's body and spun crazily. The silver-white energy spun crazily, and the entire cave rumbled. A gust of wind rushed out and swept in all directions. Ka-ka, as the silver-white runes shone brightly, the impact caused the cave walls to crack. The entire space in the cave also started to distort slightly at this moment. When the last hand seal was formed, Du Xiaofu pushed out his palm. Immediately, a bright silver-white energy palm seal covered his palm. Waves of silver-white violent energy of heaven and earth, which was almost tangible, poured into Du Xiaofu's palm seal continuously. As the violent energy of heaven and earth poured in, a strange silver-white rune appeared on Du Xiaofu's palm seal. From afar, it looked like layers of silver-white lightning lingered around it. When the silver-white palm seal completely appeared, the cave walls and the stone tablet started to crack rapidly. Gravel fell and collapsed, and was crushed into powder for no reason. Rumble. The cracks became bigger and bigger. In the energy of the palm seal, a terrifying energy spread out and overflowed, shaking the cave until it was on the verge of collapse. Oh no! At this moment, the bright silver-white palm seal in Du Xiaofu's palm shrank back into his palm at lightning speed. His expression changed greatly, and he quickly rushed out of the cave. Rumble. In an instant, the cave cracked open and huge rocks fell. The entire mountain was collapsing. A low rumbling sound reverberated endlessly. The ground shook as if there was an earthquake. Whoosh! Du Xiaofu's body appeared in mid-air. Looking down at the collapsed cliff valley, he clicked his tongue. Fortunately, he had escaped quickly. Otherwise, he would have been buried in it. The power of the lunar seal is really strong. Du Xiaofu murmured softly. His face was filled with joy and shock. Someone is really watching? Suddenly, Du Xiaofu looked up into the sky. As if he had noticed something, his expression changed slightly, and his figure suddenly disappeared. Phew! Just after Du Xiaofu disappeared, there was an obscure aura in this space. After spying for a while, it disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1170. After Du Xiaofu avoided being spied on, he quietly left. He believed that he should be able to avoid being spied on by that aura. Du Xiaofu was pleasantly surprised that he had unexpectedly obtained the third seal of the profound four-elephant seal. The rock wall in the canyon had existed for a long time. It was possible that some Haohuan school disciples had encountered it before. However, the situation was the same as the ancient heaven sect. No one had been able to comprehend the profound four-elephant seal from it. Du Xiaofu's luck was also a coincidence. Coupled with the fact that he also cultivated the Shaoyang seal, he was able to obtain it. In the Cloud Rain mountain range, Du Xiaofu maintained the speed of a perfected 4-star cultivator. Along the way, he encountered many new disciples. However, no one attacked Du Xiaofu. In a situation where the other party did not have a cultivation technique, no one would casually attack others. Along the way, Du Xiaofu encountered some disciples who were in a sorry state. They were probably in a miserable state in front of demonic beasts or in a talisman array. Du Xiaofu naturally did not pay attention to these new disciples of the Haohuan school. He headed towards the exit. Along the way, no demonic beasts dared to block his path. Du Xiaofu could also see through the talisman arrays from afar and avoid them. No one else came to provoke him. Du Xiaofu smoothly headed towards the exit. On the 10th day, when Du Xiaofu arrived at the exit mentioned by the Haohuan school's elder, he saw a towering mountain range that resembled a winding dragon. In front of him, there was a dense energy fluctuation that produced a formation fog. There was also a spatial fluctuation that was about to open the seal's exit. In front of the mountain range, A dense crowd of new disciples of the Hahuan school had gathered on a flat terrain. There were more than 10,000 people. There were many chaotic auras in the surroundings. There were also remnants of energy in the air. The ground was in a mess. It seemed that there had been many fierce battles. Du Xiaofu glanced around and landed. He was prepared to wait for the seal's opening. Senior brother Suji, it's this kid. Not long after Du Xiaofu's figure landed, there was a commotion in the crowd in front of him. The voices that rang out sounded rather familiar to Du Xiaofu's ears. When he heard the familiar voice, Du Xiaofu's eyebrows twitched. He immediately followed the voice and looked over, only to see over 100 young He Huan sect disciples escorting two people as they walked over. Among the two people who were being escorted, one of them was a young man dressed in a brocade robe who looked to be about 21 or 22 years old. He was handsome and had an arrogant look on his face. The aura of the martial royal realm indicated that he definitely had the right to be arrogant. Beside this brocade-robed young man was a rather seductive girl. Her large eyes were naturally charming, and her figure was also extremely exquisite and curvy. This caused many young men in the surroundings to secretly cast their gazes over. Du Xiaofu remembered this girl. She was the girl called Yi Qiu who had entered this place before. Beside Yi Qiu was a young man dressed in a brocade robe. He was the young man who Du Xiaofu had taught a lesson previously. That guy is unlucky. Many of the new disciples in the surroundings seemed to be extremely wary of these people. They looked pitifully at Du Xiaofu and moved away to avoid being implicated. Du Xiaofu glanced at the 100 or so new Hahuan school disciples in front of him. The martial royal realm young man should be one of the genius disciples recruited by the Hahuan school this time. Kid, you're finally here. How dare you not give face to Miss Yi Qiu and hit me? You're dead today. The young man in a brocade robe looked at Du Xiaofu's anger, and his body turned cold. You'd better not provoke me. Du Xiaofu glanced at the young man in a brocade robe and said indifferently. Du Xiaofu did not want to attract attention on this trip to the Hahuan school. It was better to keep a low profile. Attracting attention was not a good thing. Back in the Tianhuang mainland, there should have been experts from the Hahuan school who had seen him. Once he was noticed, the consequences would be severe. Kid, you're still so arrogant even when you're about to die. Do you think that Deacon Liu will protect you here? The young man in a brocade roared angrily. Now that he had a backer, he was completely fearless. However, the young man in a brocade robe did not dare to step forward again. Instead, he was afraid of being suddenly slapped again. He took a step back without leaving a trace. You disrespected Miss Yi Qiu. Hand over the Manchu cultivation method and Chinkoan bag you obtained as punishment. Don't make me attack you. The young man in a brocade robe spoke. He glanced at Du Xiaofu indifferently and arrogantly. He wanted to stand up for Yi Qiu. You're quite talented. It's a pity that you've lost your 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls because of a mediocre woman. If you continue like this, your future will be limited. Du Xiaofu looked at the young man. He was quite talented and could not help but feel a little regretful. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Yi Qiu could not help but tremble. Then, there was a trace of coldness in her eyes. Kid, you're making me very uncomfortable. I didn't want to attack you at first because you're not qualified. Now, it seems that you're courting death. The young man in a brocade robe was furious. His face turned cold in an instant. He stared at Du Xiaofu. In this place, he was definitely not afraid of anyone with his cultivation of the martial emperor realm. Phew! Du Xiaofu took a deep breath. If he was not afraid of attracting attention, he would have already attacked. Now, he could only forcefully endure it. Du Xiaofu glanced at the young man in a brocade robe called Suji. Then, he turned around, intending to ignore him. Looking at Du Xiaofu, who had turned around to leave, the young man in a brocade robe, Suji's cold face darkened again. Kid, do you want to leave? Suji's expression suddenly turned cold. A cold and sinister smile flashed across his handsome face. He took a step forward, and a vigorous and fierce aura swept out. This kind of powerful energy pressure caused some of the weaker people in the surroundings to feel a strong sense of oppression. Swish! In the next moment, the silhouette of the young man in brocade turned into a blurry afterimage at lightning speed. Along with two swift and fierce rune energy gales, he rushed towards Du Xiaofu's back at lightning speed. The claw was like a sharp blade, ruthlessly grabbing at the back of Du Xiaofu's head. With this kind of momentum, Suji simply wanted to directly kill Du Xiaofu. In any case, he would not be punished if he killed someone here. Swish! The claw fell and directly crushed the back of Du Xiaofu's head. However, under the cold and sinister smiles of Yi Qiu and the young man in a brocade robe, no blood spilled out from the back of Du Xiaofu's head. Swish! The young man in a brocade robe, Suji, who had just ascended to the martial emperor stage, grabbed at the back of Du Xiaofu's head with his claw, as if he had pierced through space. Then, Du Xiaofu's figure slowly turned illusory and finally disappeared into the spatial ripples. Afterimage. The young man in a brocade robe, Suji's expression instantly changed, and he immediately retreated vigilantly. However, just as his body was retreating vigilantly, the figure that had just disappeared in front of him appeared again. However, this time, the figure that appeared in front of Suji was already facing him. The former's eyes were filled with coldness, and a fist landed on his chest like a ghost. Bang! As the fist landed, there was a muffled sound, and a terrifying energy suddenly erupted. Swish! Blood spurted out uncontrollably, and Suji's body directly flew out, rubbing a small stream-like gully on the ground. Finally, Suji stabilized his body a few dozen feet away. He struggled to half-raise his head and looked at the tall figure in front of him in horror. Huff huff. After a short period of dead silence, a large number of gasps sounded one after another. Yi Qiu and the young man in a brocade robe were even more shocked to the point of being tongue-tied. Then, their bodies trembled, and deep fear gushed out from their eyes. Du Xiaofu ignored the young man in a brocade robe, Yi Qiu, and also ignored Suji. Instead, his gaze fell on the gully that Suji's body had just rubbed out, and on an inconspicuous stone that revealed a corner. With the mountain vein spirit in his body, that unique talent made Du Xiaofu pay attention to that inconspicuous stone. His figure flashed a few steps, and Du Xiaofu came to the side of the stone that revealed a corner. After looking at it for a while, he wanted to pull out the stone, only to find that the stone was indestructible and buried deep in the ground. Ow! Du Xiaofu's hand landed on the corner of the stone, and a huge suction force gushed out from his palm, and immediately pulled out the stone with brute force. This stone was rectangular, about 5 feet tall, and had water chestnuts on both sides. It was an extremely ordinary stone. Chapter 1171. Translator. H2DH2 Mr. Mini gazes around also looked curiously at this extremely ordinary-looking rock, watching Du Xiaofu's every move. Du Xiaofu looked at the rock in front of him. If not for the unique talent of his pulse spirit, he really would not have been able to detect the uniqueness of this rock. And right now, with the unique talent of his pulse spirit, Du Xiaofu was very certain that this was definitely not an ordinary rock. Sizzle! Du Xiaofu's eyes moved slightly as he looked at the stone in front of him. He formed a seal with his hand, and a blazing purple flame from his palm immediately wrapped around the stone and burned it. If it was an ordinary rock, under the burning of Du Xiaofu's purple flame, it would have been instantly turned into dust. But right now, this clearly extremely ordinary-looking rock was not damaged at all under the burning of Du Xiaofu's purple flame. Even its temperature did not change much. There must be something wrong here. Looking at the reaction of this rock, Du Xiaofu was even more certain that his pulse spirit's feeling was not wrong. There must be something hidden within this rock, and it could not be an ordinary thing. The injured Suji stood up. Looking at Du Xiaofu's reaction in front of him, his eyes moved slightly, a dark and cold light shooting out from behind him. In front of so many people, he had been sent flying by the other party in one move. He had never suffered such humiliation before. Suji wanted to attack, but he faintly felt some fear towards the tall and straight youth in front of him. The youth in servant's attire in front of him was definitely not a simple person and seemed to be unfathomable. Walala! The blazing purple flame boiled and wrapped around the rectangular rock. After burning for a while, there was finally a reaction. Cracks appeared around the rock, and there was a faint, dazzling light. There's a reaction. Du Xiaofu was pleasantly surprised. The purple flame in his palm became even more intense, continuously burning around the rectangular rock. Crack, crack. About a quarter of an hour later, under the blazing purple flames, his efforts paid off. The rectangular stone finally crumbled completely. Light overflowed in all directions, and a terrifying fluctuation spread out from the cracked stone, as if something was awakening from within. Boom! The surrounding space suddenly trembled. Rays of rune light were like materialized waterfalls, emitting a kind of divine power. The power spread out as the runes soared into the sky. A terrifying aura spread out as if it wanted to crush everyone in the square. In an instant, an enormous pressure enveloped the entire square. Walala! As the pressure descended, the rectangular stone exploded, revealing a dazzling ancient scroll. This ancient scroll was impervious to fire and water. It flickered with multicolored light, as if a glorious sun had descended. It was just an ancient scroll, but it seemed to bear the pressure of heaven and earth, as if it was above the 9 heavens, and contained a kind of great martial intent. Boom! The ancient scroll exploded with divine light. The light was released like a glorious sun, covering the sky and the earth. It traversed the sky and drew in the energy of heaven and earth, bringing with it lightning and thunder. The light was resplendent and dazzling. The frightening pressure emitted from the ancient scroll caused the bodies of all the disciples from the He Huan sect to tremble and their legs to go soft. Plop, plop, then, one by one, the Ha Huan school's disciples staggered and directly knelt down. What is it? A treasure? Let's recognize its master first. Du Xiaofu felt that the ancient scroll was extraordinary. He couldn't help but be surprised. He slightly gritted his teeth, and his mind swept out. A silver-white light moved between his eyebrows and tentatively swept toward the ancient scroll. His mind swept over. Just as he approached the ancient scroll, Du Xiaofu felt a great pressure blocking his primordial spirit, as if it didn't want him to get close. His mind trembled. A silver-white lightning directly swept out from Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit between his eyebrows and suddenly swept toward the ancient scroll. He wanted to force it to recognize him as its master, but he didn't want to delay any unforeseen events. Chi-la-la-la, as Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit tried to force the scroll to recognize him as its master, it seemed to have inadvertently touched something. Perhaps the scroll had sensed some kind of aura, and suddenly the light was torn apart. In the next moment, the ancient scroll opened like a flower petal. Then, it separated and fell, bursting out with resplendent runes that turned into substance. The runes shone brightly and densely in the void, making bursts of sounds that sounded like the sound of Tao. Buzz buzz. At this moment, this space seemed to be in a miracle. Mysterious runes seeped out from the void, causing everyone's mind to ripple. The sound was deafening, as if a deity was chanting. Chila. Amidst this shocking change, within the resplendent light, a ray of resplendent light materialized. It was like a thunderbolt that carried a resplendent path and instantly bombarded the space between Du Xiaofu's eyebrows. This vast ray of light swept in, causing Du Xiaofu's body to tremble violently. He immediately closed his eyes, and then his whole body was enveloped by the light of the miracle. The mountains were connected, varying in height. They stood tall and straight, holding up the sky. An elegant palace was built against the mountain, revealing its silhouette in the lush greenery. In a quiet courtyard, a young man who seemed to be around 28 or 29 years old sat cross-legged. His smooth, white face had a chiseled outline. His eyes were tightly shut, and he was enveloped by light. Chi! Suddenly, the light around the young man violently trembled. His long, curly eyelashes trembled slightly, and in that moment, a pair of eyes that were as clear as morning dew opened. Light shot out from his eyes. The Qianyang dragon subduing technique has appeared. The young man's eyes violently trembled. The cloudy rain mountain had taken action. Light enveloped Du Xiaofu, making him seem like a miracle, radiating with resplendent light. The resplendent runes formed from the ancient scroll in the air made people kneel down with the pressure of their auras. That person must have obtained great benefits. Inside that ancient scroll, there must be an earth-shattering divine ability. Someone in the crowd cried out in surprise. The terrifying pressure spread out, making everyone wonder just what kind of powerful ability the young man had obtained to cause such a terrifying pressure to descend. You still want the treasure? Go die. Suji finally found an opportunity. With a cold bellow, he did not hold back at all, releasing all of his aura. Boom! Suji struck out with his full strength. His hand clenched into a fist, and killing intent was contained within it. His fist was like a bolt of lightning as he hurled it at Du Xiaofu's back. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was enveloped by light. His eyes were tightly shut, and he could not feel anything. He was unable to dodge at all. Kid, die. Suji sneered. Not only would he get his revenge by killing this kid, but the great treasure would also fall into his hands. It was killing two birds with one stone. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. Bang! The terrifying fist contained Suji's full strength. The air in front of the fist distorted as it pierced through space like a thunderbolt meteorite. In an instant, it fiercely hit Du Xiaofu's back. A dull explosion resounded. Many people in the surroundings sucked in a breath of cold air for Du Xiaofu. At this moment, almost everyone thought that the young man in servant's clothing was definitely dead. Under everyone's astonished gazes, as Suji's all-out killing punch landed on Du Xiaofu's back, he let out a miserable shriek like a chain reaction. Along with that miserable wail, Suji's bones, muscles, and skin all cracked and shattered in an instant, spreading all the way to his shoulders and then to his entire body. In the end, Suji's body was directly shattered into a bloody mist in an instant. Bang, bang. The body of Suji, who had just reached the martial royal realm, turned into a bloody mist. He probably never thought that one day he would kill himself. At this moment, Du Xiaofu seemed to have lost consciousness, but he did not really lose consciousness. With Du Xiaofu's current cultivation base and physical body's freakish strength, his physical body could reflexively form a protective energy when encountering an enemy in this state. Suji was just a martial royal realm beginner. Even if there were 10,000 of him, he would not be a match for Du Xiaofu at this moment. This was Suji's killing punch. Even if Du Xiaofu did not move at all, he would still feel itchy. With Du Xiaofu's abnormal physical body, the little Suji could not cause any harm at all. The protective energy that Du Xiaofu's body reflexively formed automatically gathered and rebounded when Suji's punch landed. That terrible power was not something that Suji, who had just reached the martial royal realm, could resist. At this moment, he was shattered into a bloody mist and his spirit was destroyed. It was equivalent to killing himself. Oh my God, Suji is dead. Seeing Suji being shattered into a bloody mist by the rebound, many people in the surroundings were dumbstruck. They were flabbergasted. This scene caused everyone to feel disbelief. How could this be? The young man in luxurious clothes and Yi Qiu, who had originally regarded Suji as their backer, were so frightened at this scene that their beautiful faces turned pale and their eyes trembled. Not long after, everything gradually began to calm down. The bright light around Du Xiaofu gradually dissipated, and the terrible pressure that had descended also gradually dissipated. Finally, the light completely dissipated, and Du Xiaofu stood quietly. The surrounding people were shocked, and the pressure had completely disappeared. Some of the new disciples were finally able to stand up from their kneeling position. Phew! After a long time, Du Xiaofu exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and opened his eyes. His clear eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 1172. Qinyang Dragon Subduing Art. Du Xiaofu murmured. What Du Xiaofu had obtained from the resplendent runic light of the ancient scroll was a set of Hahuan School's Qinyang Dragon Subduing Art. The Qinyang Dragon Subduing Art was definitely a top-notch set of techniques. It was unfathomably profound and had reached the peak of the earth level. It was only a step away from a true heaven-level technique. This Qinyang Dragon Subduing Art was also a set of Hahuan School's dual cultivation techniques. However, This set of dual cultivation techniques was not something that the other dual cultivation techniques of Hahuan school could compare to. From the Qinyang dragon subduing art, Du Xiaofu learned that the final stage of the Qinyang dragon subduing art required dual cultivation. Dual cultivation was divided into 3 categories: upper, middle, and lower. The lower category was harvesting yin to replenish yang, and harvesting yang to replenish yin. The lower category borrowed from the past and used human words to describe it. They hypothesized that the woman was their home and the man was their cauldron. They used sexual pleasures to complement it, and used sexual copulation to deceive people into taking it. They took the filthy essence of the man, the turbid snot of the woman, and swallowed it as food. The Tao became more obscure. People coveted the pleasures of the woman's cauldron and lost their essence through sexual copulation. They called it harvesting. This was originally a matter of hastening death, but they called it the Tao of immortality. It was truly a lower category. The middle category dual cultivation techniques were similar to most of the Hahuan school's techniques. First, they cultivated one's nature. Next, they refined one's essence and qi to cultivate one's life. Men and women were connected by yin and yang. Qi was refined into spirit, spirit was refined into emptiness, and one's own foundation was refined. They eliminated selfish and distracting thoughts and progressed together. However, the upper category dual cultivation techniques recorded in the Qinyang dragon subduing art were completely different from the middle category and lower category dual cultivation techniques. The man did not undress, and the woman did not wear a belt. In the end, they could achieve spiritual intercourse from 1,000 miles away. This upper category dual cultivation technique was not about harvesting yin to replenish yang in the bedroom. Instead, I gather the qi of heaven and earth to replenish my qi, gather the essence of heaven and earth to replenish my essence, and gather the spirit of heaven and earth to replenish my spirit. Because of the transformation of heaven and earth, I was created. Because of the fate of heaven and earth, I continued my life. If the qi of heaven and earth did not exist, my qi would not exist. If the qi of heaven and earth did not exist, my qi would not exist. If the qi of heaven and earth did not exist, my qi would not exist. Because heaven and earth are endlessly born, I am endlessly born. Heaven and earth are always new, and I am always new. Profound, too profound. Du Xiaofu was amazed by the Qinyang dragon subduing exercise that he had obtained. It was a vast set of exercises. Although it seemed to require dual cultivation in the end, it was completely different from the current exercises of Hahuan school. It was the best dual cultivation exercise. The most peculiar thing was that this Qinyang subduing dragon technique could only be cultivated by men, and only the most masculine men could successfully cultivate it. So this is the true dual cultivation exercise of Hahuan school. Du Xiaofu was amazed. He did not know why such a powerful and profound exercise of Hahuan school would appear in this place. Such an exercise would definitely tempt even the Kyushu experts. It's really a waste. A bitter smile appeared on Du Xiaofu's face. This powerful and profound cultivation technique was not of much use to him. If Du Xiaofu had cultivated an ordinary human exercise, he could have used it as a reference and benefited a lot. However, Du Xiaofu was currently cultivating the golden-winged Great Peng Bird Clan's exercise. It was completely the exercise of the Beast Clan, which was completely different from the exercise of humans. The golden-winged Great Peng Bird Clan's exercise was definitely not inferior to the Qinyang dragon subduing exercise. The two exercises could not be compared at all. They could only be said to have their own merits. However, in comparison, Du Xiaofu felt that the golden-winged Great Peng Bird Clan's exercise was much more domineering, and he liked it more. After smiling bitterly, Du Xiaofu scanned his surroundings. Seeing that Suji's body had turned into a bloody mist, Du Xiaofu's gaze finally landed on the well-dressed young man and Yiqiu. What are you trying to do? If you dare to touch me, my cousin will not let you off. Yiqiu's eyes finally revealed a hint of fear as her delicate body continuously retreated. The well-dressed young man did not dare to meet Du Xiaofu's gaze. He also continuously retreated beside the girl called Yiqiu, his entire body trembling. The two of them had originally thought that with Suji around, the young man before them was dead for sure. Who would have thought that the young man before them would actually be so strangely valiant? Originally, it was just a flea that I could not be bothered with. But now, I cannot let you off. A cold light flashed in Du Xiaofu's eyes. With a wave of his hand, 2 streaks of golden light shot out, landing directly on Yi Qiu and the well-dressed young man. Bang bang! Given the strength of Yi Qiu and the well-dressed young man, how could they resist? They did not even have time to scream before they were smashed into pieces. The hundreds of disciples who had originally clustered around Suji and Yi Qiu all trembled as their legs turned to jelly. Horror filled their eyes as they scattered in fear, afraid that the terrifying young man would not let them off. That is a malefic star. We cannot provoke him. The eyes of countless disciples in the surroundings trembled as they made up their minds to avoid the young man if they encountered him in the future. They simply could not afford to provoke him. Du Xiaofu did not pay attention to the disciples. He raised his head slightly and looked at the sky without leaving a trace as he muttered to himself. Has he finally attracted attention? Qila, at the same time, the rippling spatial runes in the sky began to accelerate. An aura spread out as an exit of the seal opened. The exit is open. It's time to go out. The exit of the seal had already opened. Immediately, an overwhelming number of figures rushed towards the exit. The disciples and experts of the Hahuan school were already waiting at the exit. The deacons and protectors of the Hahuan school were there to examine the disciples who had obtained the cultivation method and passed the trial. Du Xiaofu queued up, but he did not see Deacon Lu Chui. He did not even see the Hahuan school disciple who had led them here in Yuanxi City. More than 20,000 new disciples had entered the Mount of Clouds and Rain for trial. In the end, only half of them had passed the trial and officially become disciples of the Hahuan school. 3,000 to 4,000 people had died in the Mount of Clouds and Rain in 10 days, while the rest were directly eliminated. It was enough to show how cruel the trial was. If the new disciples who had been eliminated wanted to stay in the Hahuan school, they could only become outer sect disciples of the Hahuan school. The so-called outer sect disciples were actually not much different from servants. However, they would have the opportunity to pass the test and other opportunities in the future to become official disciples of the Hahuan school again. Otherwise, they would have to return home. Where's Suji? All the disciples had come out, but Suji was nowhere to be seen. This immediately attracted the attention of many experts of the Hahuan school. Suji was the focus of the Hahuan school this time. With his talent, many elders were already fighting over him. Once he entered the Manchu, he would immediately become an inner sect disciple. Moreover, he would not be an ordinary inner sect disciple. Now that Suji had not come out, many experts of the Hahuan school were worried. Elder, Suji is dead. A disciple who was questioned by the protector had no choice but to look at Du Xiaofu in the distance before replying honestly. Dead? How did he die? When the Hahuan school's elders, protectors, and deacons heard this, they were all stunned. Suji ambushed someone, but he was killed by the shockwave. After many disciples explained, the elders, protectors, and deacons of the Hahuan school roughly understood what had happened. What's your name? How did you kill Suji? What kind of treasure did you obtain? Immediately, a group of Hahuan school's elders and protectors surrounded Du Xiaofu. Disciple Fu Xiaodu obtained a yellow-tier Manchu cultivation method. Suji took the opportunity to ambush me and steal the treasure. In the end, I don't know what happened, but he died by himself. Du Xiaofu answered casually without leaving any trace. In any case, these elders weren't there, so the dead couldn't testify. However, Du Xiaofu was worried about the Hahuan school's expert who was monitoring the seal on the Mount of Clouds and Rain. He didn't know if it would attract the expert's attention. The Qianyang subduing dragon technique had caused quite a commotion. Kid, are you lying? A middle-aged man at the peak of the martial emperor realm from the Hahuan school shouted. He didn't believe Du Xiaofu's words. If I can kill Suji, doesn't that prove that I'm stronger than Suji? Du Xiaofu looked at the middle-aged man and retorted. The middle-aged man was speechless. He didn't believe that this young man, who was dressed like a servant, had the strength to kill Suji. After that, an old elder and several protectors from the Hahuan school examined Du Xiaofu again. They didn't find anything out of the ordinary. The protectors and the old elder from the Hahuan school also asked Du Xiaofu what kind of cultivation technique he had obtained inside. Du Xiaofu had obtained quite a number of cultivation techniques from the Hahuan school. He said that he had obtained the highest cultivation technique, a yellow-tier middle-level cultivation technique, to fool them. In the end, the old elder and the protectors couldn't find anything, so they had no choice but to give up. Congratulations on becoming an official disciple of the Hahuan school. You will return to the sect today. Those with good results will be selected by the protectors and elders of the Manchu to become inner sect disciples. As for whether you will be chosen by the Manchu elders, it will depend on your own luck. The old elder's voice was loud and clear as he spoke to the disciples who had passed the examination. Gore, roar. A moment later, a large group of demonic beast mounts soared into the sky and carried the disciples who had passed the examination to the Hahuan school. I wonder if Jijian is in the Hahuan school. Du Xiaofu frowned on the flying demonic beast mount. He had been worried all this time. I wonder what your name is, junior brother. I should be a little older. My name is Huang Ying. Junior brother, you can call me Senior Huang Ying in the future. Chapter 1173. A gentle voice landed in Du Xiaofu's ears. That voice was so charming that it made one's ears go soft. Du Xiaofu looked towards the source of the voice. A beautiful woman on the flying beast walked forward. This beautiful woman was about 22 or 23 years old. Her jet-black hair was tied up in a princess bun with a pearl flower hairpin. She had fair and soft skin, a pair of slender eyebrows, and thick red lips. The corners of her mouth were slightly curved upwards, carrying a kind of seductive smile. This woman's attire was also very flirtatious. Her chest was high, half exposed and half hidden. The curve of her body was exquisite and curvaceous, making one's heart flutter. You are indeed senior sister. You are already so old. Do you think senior brother would like to eat old grass? Just as Du Xiaofu was sizing her up in surprise, a clear voice rang out. He saw a young girl walking over slowly. She was elegant and graceful, with bright eyes and white teeth. Her face was dazzling. She was only 16 or 17 years old, but her figure was already graceful. This young girl looked at Du Xiaofu, smiled, and said, "Greetings, senior brother. I am Zhou Renjie. Senior brother can just call me Ro-er." This senior sister Huang Ying wants to become Dao companions with senior brother. Seeing senior brother's mighty and majestic appearance, she wants to hit on senior brother. Dao companions? Du Xiaofu looked at Zhou Renjie and the girl called Huang Ying, slightly stunned. Hee. Zhou Renjie giggled and said to Du Xiaofu, "So senior apprentice brother still doesn't know. After we enter the all-pleasure sect, those who cultivate the dual cultivation technique can find a dual cultivation Dao companion. This way, their cultivation will be like a tiger that has grown wings, and they will achieve twice the results with half the effort. The stronger the strength and talent of the dual cultivation Dao companion, the greater the benefits for the cultivator in the future. Some dual cultivation Dao companions, once confirmed, are together for life." This senior apprentice sister Huang Ying probably saw senior apprentice brother and even killed Su Ji. She must have seen senior apprentice brother's prowess and wanted to become dual cultivation Dao companions with senior apprentice brother. Zhou Renjie, what do you mean by this? Huang Ying looked coldly at Zhou Renjie, her eyes almost spitting fire. My meaning is very clear. I think senior sister Huang Ying is a little too old. If you and senior brother become Dao companions, it will be like an old cow eating young grass. I'm afraid senior brother won't like eating young grass. Zhou Renjie glanced at Huang Ying, then looked at Huang Ying and said indifferently, "And I'm much younger than you. I'm more suitable for this senior brother." You're courting death. Huang Ying was furious. This Zhou Renjie actually dared to say that she was old, and even dared to butt in when she was looking for a Dao companion. She was immediately unable to restrain her anger and was about to attack. She had long taken a fancy to that young man called Fu Xiaodu. She didn't believe that Fu Xiaodu had accidentally killed Su Ji. There must be something hidden behind it. She was willing to take a gamble. Senior brother, look at that vixen Huang Ying. She actually wants to attack me. Senior brother, save me. Zhou Renjie shouted and immediately leaned towards Du Xiaofu with a seductive look. She was the same as Huang Ying. She also didn't believe that Suji's death was a coincidence. Cough. Du Xiaofu coughed awkwardly and said to the two, I don't plan to find a Dao companion. Huang Ying seemed to be somewhat afraid of Zhou Renjie. At this moment, when she heard Du Xiaofu's words, her breath stagnated. She was somewhat puzzled and said to Du Xiaofu, could it be that junior brother already has a Dao companion in mind? That's not it. It's just that the Manchu cultivation method I obtained doesn't require a Dao companion. Du Xiaofu said with a wry smile. Huang Ying was slightly stunned after hearing this. Then, she didn't say anything else. Disappointment could be seen in her eyes. If she could find a powerful Dao companion after entering the Hahuan school, it would greatly benefit her in the future. She would be like a tiger that had grown wings. Even Suji wasn't a match for this young man before her. Just how powerful was he? He would definitely be valued by the Manchu powerhouses. Becoming a personal disciple wouldn't be a problem for him. He might even be accepted as a disciple by the Manchu powerhouses. If he were to become her Dao companion after entering the Hahuan school, it would be tantamount to her being able to do whatever she wanted after entering the Hahuan school. But now, Huang Ying couldn't help but feel disappointed after learning that the young man didn't need a Dao companion. Hee hee, Zhou Renjie giggled. Her graceful figure trembled as she laughed. Although she wasn't old, her chest was already towering, moving up and down with her laughter. It turns out that the cultivation method senior brother obtained doesn't require a Dao companion. It doesn't matter. Senior brother can come and find me at any time. If senior brother changes his mind, junior sister will wait for senior brother at any time. Zhou Renjie looked at Du Xiaofu with a coquettish expression. Her eyes were filled with seduction and indescribable seduction. Du Xiaofu could only smile bitterly. He couldn't help but think of those beautiful figures. If Dongli Qingqing and Qi Yeshi were here, they would definitely roll their eyes at him. If the tomboy and Sima Muhan were here, it would be enough to make him look bad. After thinking about it, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but think of Morong Yurua. If she were here, she would definitely smile and ignore him. After Zhou Renjie and Huang Ying retreated, no other girls came up. Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged and waited to enter the Hahuan school. The Cloud Rain Mountain wasn't too far from the Hahuan school. A day later, the outline of a vast mountain range appeared before everyone's eyes. The mountains in the mountain range were connected. The peaks stood like a tripod, holding up the blue sky. As they entered the mountain range, they saw beautiful green peaks and clouds. The energy of heaven and earth was extremely rich. This was a treasure land. It was extremely extraordinary. That was why the Hahuan school settled here. Palaces and buildings were built on the mountain, revealing their outlines in the lush green. In the air, there were figures flying out from time to time. There was also an obscure aura coming from the mountains. Du Xiaofu secretly piqued with his consciousness. There were many talisman arrays around the Hahuan school. There were many experts and many disciples. After a while, in a densely packed courtyard, the new disciples who passed the test this time alighted from their flying demonic beasts. In the distance, there were many disciples of the Hahuan school. They were pointing and gossiping about the new disciples. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked into the distance. They had finally arrived at the Hahuan school. Senior brother, those are the senior disciples of the Hahuan school. They might be looking for beautiful and handsome disciples to become Dao companions among the new disciples. Of course, the most important thing is still talent. Zhou Renjie had been following Du Xiaofu all this time. She thought that Du Xiaofu was curious about the disciples of the Hahuan school who were watching from afar. She explained to Du Xiaofu, however, those people are not very good. If they were talented enough and had a good future, they would have been chosen as Dao companions long ago. Back then, no one took a fancy to them. Now, they can only coax Dao companions among the new disciples. Or perhaps some of the senior brothers and sisters are tired of their Dao companions and want to find a suitable Dao companion among the new disciples. You know quite a lot. Du Xiaofu smiled and asked Zhou Renjie. This little girl seemed to know quite a lot. My family has a small relationship with the Hahuan school, so I know a little about the Hahuan school. Zhou Renjie looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled shyly. She said, Senior brother, even if you don't need a Dao companion, as a normal man, it's inevitable that you will need a Dao companion. When the time comes, Senior brother can come and find me at any time. This junior sister is willing to give up everything for senior brother. Thank you for your kindness. We're here. Du Xiaofu's body trembled, and he immediately took the opportunity to avoid her. Haha, seeing Du Xiaofu flee, Zhou Renjie giggled. Her eyes rippled as she said, interesting. Sooner or later, you won't be able to escape from this young lady's palm. You'll fall at my feet. Hahuan School. The disciples of the Hahuan School arranged accommodations for everyone. Some of the disciples with extraordinary talent were finally arranged to stay in separate rooms. The treatment they enjoyed was also different. It was much better than the other disciples. Du Xiaofu was also included in the lineup with good treatment because he was related to Suji's death. Zhou Renjie and Huang Ying were also quite talented. They stayed not far from Du Xiaofu's room. Dusk. When the sunset glow faded, the world turned into a silvery gray color. The milky white smoke and the gray evening mist blended together. The light penetrated the dense buildings, and everything in the Hahuan School were faintly discernible. The fluttering light enveloped the mountains, giving the Hahuan School a wonderful atmosphere under the curtain of night. A young man stood quietly in front of an elegant courtyard. He looked to be about 28 or 29 years old. His body was covered in a dark purple satin. His figure was extremely graceful. Under the young man's long and curly eyelashes, his clear eyes were like morning dew. They carried a faint charm and seduction. The charm in this young man's eyes could not only charm all women, but it could also make men's hearts flutter. It was very charming. Whoosh, a middle-aged man flew over. He had a muscular figure and a burning gaze. Did you find him? The charming young man's voice was clear. His hair was tied up in a high bun. His long hair flowed down his back like flowing water, giving him an imposing aura. The most suspicious one is a disciple called Fu Xiaodu. He caused a huge commotion at the entrance of the Cloudy Rain Mountain. The death of a peak sovereign personage called Su Ji is also related to him. He is a newly ascended martial monarch. He is very well hidden, the middle-aged man replied. He looked at the charming young man with reverence. Fu Xiaodu. The charming young man looked up at the sunset glow in the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. Sect Master, should we bring Fu Xiaodu here for questioning? The middle-aged man asked. Chapter 1174. There's no need. The charming young man shook his head and said softly, tomorrow is the entrance ceremony for the new disciples. The square will be on full alert. Hearing this, the middle-aged man was shocked. Master, could it be that the enemies of the Manchu will come tomorrow? Could it be that they are preparing to? They don't have the guts yet. They are only relying on the support of the Grand Elders. The charming young man shook his head. Then, he looked up at the sunset and said, a demon king has arrived at the sect. There will definitely be a huge battle tomorrow. We have to minimize the casualties. We can't alert the enemy for now. I understand. I'll arrange it now. The middle-aged man was shocked and immediately left in a hurry. Fu Xiaodu. Du Xiaofu. The charming young man looked at the sky and his eyes rippled. No wonder the devil religion and the son of the divine light court couldn't find you in the central province. So you came to Shang province and really came to the Hahuan school. Could it be that that little girl is really so important to you? As soon as he finished speaking, the charming young man's figure disappeared on the spot. At night, the moon was bright and the stars were dim. The sky was like a dream. When the charming young man reappeared, he was in a quiet room. A faint fragrance filled the air. A woman sat cross-legged on the bed. Her eyebrows were drawn like ink and her lips were like cherry blossoms. As if she sensed someone coming, the woman suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes shone brightly as she got up and rushed out. Her hair was tied with a light yellow ribbon. Her black hair fell to her waist, and her waist was slim. This woman had an ethereal temperament. It was Ji Jiyan. Have you thought it through? As long as you join the Hahuan school and become my Dao companion, your Ji family will rise. You will be second only to one person. The charming young man looked at Ji Jiyan. His clear eyes were charming and smiling. That smile was enough to move the hearts of all women. Coupled with his identity, there were not many women in the world who could refuse him. Pervert, even if I die, I will never become your Dao companion. Ji Jian stared at the charming young man, her voice soft and moving. Even under the pressure of the other party's invisible aura, she stood straight and did not back down. Her talent is close to that of a human sovereign. Her body is also very special. It's the legendary heavenly Yin body. The charming young man frowned and looked at Ji Jian. He took 3 steps forward and said, "Are you waiting for Fu Dabai to save you?" Brother Dabai. Ji Jian's eyes trembled when she heard this. She immediately looked at the charming young man and asked, "What did you do to Big Brother Dabai?" That guy is really a womanizer. Wherever he goes, there are women accompanying him. The charming young man raised his eyes. Under the illumination of the bright pearls in the room, his clear eyes sparkled like black gemstones. He looked at Ji Jian and said, "You probably don't know what kind of person your Big Brother Dabai is, right?" Hearing this, Ji Jian's eyes froze. Her jet black hair fell on her slim waist, outlining a moving arc. After being stunned for a moment, Ji Jian pursed her lips and said to the charming young man, "I already know that Big Brother Dabai is not an ordinary person. No matter who he is, he will always be my Big Brother Dabai." Big Brother Dabai, gazing at Ji Jian before him, the charming man's clear eyes were filled with a smile. A slight breeze blew by, causing her beautiful hair to flutter. Gue had a soul-stirring temperament as he laughed. "Tomorrow, I will make you give up with your own eyes. At that time, you can throw yourself into my embrace." The charming young man disappeared after he finished speaking. Night, in the room. Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged and suddenly opened his eyes. A light flickered in his eyes before it disappeared. Creak. The door was pushed open and closed gently. A familiar figure appeared in the room. Then, that person casually set up a seal. Her eyes were filled with charm. Although she was in her 30s, she was still charming. She was the deacon of the Hahuan school, Lu Chui. "Brother, big sister is here." Lu Chui lowered her voice and walked to Du Xiaofu's side with a smile. "Big sister Lu Chui." Du Xiaofu stood up. He knew her origin, so he wasn't surprised that Lu Chui came in the middle of the night. His gaze shifted, and he handed the spiritual ice lotus to Lu Chui. "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you." Spiritual ice lotus. Lu Chui's eyes trembled. She looked at the aura that was suffused with a cold aura. Her eyes were filled with joy, and she immediately stored it in her Qinkuan pouch. "You are really big sister's good brother." Lu Chui gazed at Du Xiaofu as a smile blossomed on her face. She gently caressed Du Xiaofu's face as the corners of her lips curled up. Her seduction was self-evident as she said, "Little brother has done such a big thing for me. Why don't I reward you like this? Why don't I accept whatever little brother wants to do?" Big sister Lu Chui is too polite. "It was just a small matter. There is no need to thank me." Du Xiaofu couldn't help but take a step back. He didn't dare to get close to Lu Chui. Du Xiaofu knew that in the Hahuan school's dual cultivation method, there was a way to absorb yang to replenish yin. It was better to stay away from this woman. "Little brother, you are shy. You haven't really tasted the joy of being intimate." Lu Chui smiled charmingly. Her slender hands gently landed on Du Xiaofu's chest, gently pressing against it. Her red lips slightly pursed, and her eyes were filled with charm as she said, "You're really strong and muscular. Elder sister really wants to have a taste." "Big sister Lu Chui, I have some questions about the munch," Du Xiaofu asked. He was very depressed. He couldn't lose his virginity. "Little brother, if there's anything you want to know, you'll know tomorrow. Tomorrow is the entrance ceremony for the new disciples. I heard that even the sect master will be there personally. If you have any questions, the senior brothers and sisters in the sect will answer them." Lu Chui stopped after being interrupted by Du Xiaofu. She looked at Du Xiaofu and seemed to have thought of something. Her eyes moved as she said, "I heard that little brother seems to have killed Suji as well. This really surprised elder sister." "I don't know how Suji died." Du Xiaofu shook his head. Naturally, he wouldn't admit it. He didn't care about the suspicions of the Hahuan school. The most important thing now was to find out about Ji Jian's whereabouts. Du Xiaofu continued to ask, "I wonder if big sister Lu Chui has heard of the Ji family in Tianquan City?" Lu Chui shook her head and said, "I have heard of Tianquan City. I also have some impression of the Ji family, but I don't remember. Then I wonder if big sister Lu Chui knows that people from the Ji family have come to the Haohuan school recently? Du Xiaofu asked. The Ji family in Tianquan City seems to be a vassal force of our Haohuan school. They should have some disciples in our Haohuan school. However, I don't know if they have come recently. I have been busy recruiting new disciples and am not in Manchu. Lu Chui shook her head. Du Xiaofu frowned slightly. It seemed that Lu Chui really didn't know. He could only think of other ways to investigate. My good little brother, are you related to the Ji family? Lu Chui was suspicious. She had been looking for information about the Ji family for a long time, which made her suspicious of Du Xiaofu. Seeing Lu Chui's suspicion, Du Xiaofu said, "To tell you the truth, I came to the Haohuan school this time because I wanted to find out about a young lady from the Ji family. I didn't know that you were such a romantic." Lu Chui giggled and said to Du Xiaofu, "If that's the case, big sister will help you find out the name of the young lady from the Ji family. As long as she is in the Haohuan school, I will be able to find her." Thank you very much. Du Xiaofu smiled and told Lu Chui about Ji Zhiyin's appearance and name. With Lu Chui's help, it shouldn't be difficult to find her in the Haohuan school. He also told Lu Chui to investigate in secret. Lu Chui didn't suspect anything. She was in a good mood after obtaining the Spirit Ice Lotus. She didn't plan to do anything to Du Xiaofu after that. She even gave Du Xiaofu a few instructions for tomorrow's entrance ceremony before leaving. After Lu Chui left, Du Xiaofu continued to sit cross-legged. He was deep in thought. He would wait for Lu Chui to find out more information for a day or two. He would also use these 2 days to find out more information. When he officially became a disciple of the Haohuan school tomorrow, it should be easier for him to do things in the Haohuan school. I hope that no one recognizes me tomorrow. Du Xiaofu sighed softly. He was a little worried. Back in the Tianhuang continent, he had killed Kain Old Ghost. At that time, there should be many disciples of the Haohuan school who saw him. He hoped that no one would recognize him tomorrow. I should be more careful. No one should recognize me. Du Xiaofu comforted himself. There would be so many new disciples tomorrow. If he hid in the crowd, no one would recognize him. After that, Du Xiaofu continued to regulate his breathing. He was afraid that there would be unforeseen events tomorrow. It was better to maintain himself in peak condition first. However, everything didn't go as Du Xiaofu thought. He would be able to hide in the crowd during the entrance ceremony. The next morning, the sun rose from the east and illuminated the mountains. The official disciples of the Haohuan school led the new disciples to the Haohuan school's plaza to participate in the entrance ceremony. Du Xiaofu and the others were arranged to sit in front of the plaza. Beside them were Zhou Renjie and Huang Ying from yesterday. The plaza was densely packed with tens of thousands of disciples standing quietly. The people in front were the absolute elites of the younger generation. They were all dragons and phoenixes among men. Chapter 1175. Tens of thousands of new disciples stood in the middle, not daring to even breathe loudly. An obscure and powerful aura permeated the square. There were many experts in the square all around. This doesn't seem normal. Du Xiaofu looked around and secretly spied. He felt that the atmosphere in the square was not normal. It was tense and oppressive for no reason. Du Xiaofu felt the presence of talisman arrays in the square. There were also many auras of martial royal realm and 7-star talisman masters hiding in the surroundings. There were even many auras of martial honorables and 8-star talisman masters hiding in the shadows. Could I have been recognized? Du Xiaofu muttered to himself and lowered his head. He was still worried. Senior brother Fu, how did you get your face like this? Let me help you wipe it. Zhou Renjie looked at Du Xiaofu, who was not far away, and was surprised. At this moment, senior brother Fu's face was covered with dust from who knows where. His originally resolute face was almost unrecognizable. Zhou Renjie took out a handkerchief with a faint fragrance and was about to personally wipe Du Xiaofu's face. Thank you, junior sister. However, the entrance ceremony is about to begin. Let's just stand there. After the ceremony is over, I'll go back and wash up. Du Xiaofu immediately shook his head and signaled Zhou Renjie to stay away from him. This was something Du Xiaofu had done on purpose. Before leaving this morning, he had grabbed a handful of black dust and wiped it on his face. Du Xiaofu didn't want to be recognized by the people of the He Huan sect. Naturally, he couldn't wipe it off right now. The dignified Haohuan school was full of experts. At this moment, he was still in the headquarters of the Haohuan school. If he was discovered by the people of Haohuan school, Du Xiaofu knew that a huge battle would be unavoidable. At that time, whether he could walk out of the Haohuan school would still be a problem. Whoosh whoosh, as Du Xiaofu's voice fell, the sound of wind breaking could be heard from the sky. Du Xiaofu raised his head and saw streaks of light streaking across the sky. Seeing that someone had come, Zhou Renjie did not continue to pester them. She immediately stood respectfully and did not dare to speak. In just 2 flashes, a large number of figures landed in front of the rows of seats on the high platform in front of the square. When the hundreds of figures landed, waves of invisible auras froze the entire square, causing the hearts of the tens of thousands of disciples in the vast square to tremble. Among these hundreds of people, there were many who had the aura of a martial honorable and an 8-star talisman master. There were also many real martial venerables and 8-star spiritual talisman masters. Among them, there were even Hunyuan martial venerables and Hunyuan spiritual talisman masters. It was evident that there were many experts in Haohuan school. Their strength was only below the top behemoths in Shangzhou. On the high platform, beside those people, there was a young man who looked to be about 27 or 28 years old standing quietly. His white and fair face was shrouded in the morning sun, revealing an angular curve. In particular, the young man's beautiful lips seemed to be showing off his nobility and elegance. There was a faint charm in his eyes. "Greetings, sect master." On the square, tens of thousands of disciples bowed to him. When Du Xiaofu's gaze fell on the charming young man, his eyes trembled violently as if he had been struck by lightning. How could Du Xiaofu forget the charming young man? Back then, on the Tianhuang mainland, this person had chased after him and Dongli Qingqing. In the end, they had met the Yin Thunder Old Man from the Devil Religion. The charming young man and the Yin Thunder Old Man had joined forces to deal with Dongli Qingqing. Later on, Dongli Qingqing's master had used a wisp of primordial spirit power to frighten away the Yin Thunder Old Man and the charming young man. However, the charming young man had returned in the end. As for the final all-out battle, Du Xiaofu himself did not know why he had blacked out. He only vaguely remembered that the other party had used a primordial spirit attack. When he woke up, the charming young man had already disappeared. Dongli Qingqing had also left behind a voice transmission before disappearing. This left Du Xiaofu with some doubts. He is the Haohuan school's sect master, Su Muxin. Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled. No wonder the charming young man had attacked as soon as they met. It turned out that the charming young man was the Haohuan school's sect master. During this period of time, Du Xiaofu had inquired about the Haohuan school. The Haohuan school's sect master was called Su Muxin and was an extremely terrifying expert. Su Muxin was not very old, but she was very famous in Shangzhou. Even the leaders of the top forces did not dare to underestimate Su Muxin. "It's Jiyan. She is indeed from the Haohuan school." Then, Du Xiaofu's gaze fell on a young woman beside Su Muxin, and he secretly trembled. The woman's eyebrows were like ink, her lips were like cherry blossoms, and her spirit was like autumn waters. She appeared ethereal and elegant, and she had an unforgettable gentle temperament. Who else could she be other than Ji Jiyan from the Ji family? However, at this moment, Du Xiaofu was sizing up Ji Jiyan. She seemed fine, but her aura was stagnant, and her expression was abnormal. It was obvious that she had been restricted. "You may all rise." Su Muxin looked at the square and waved her purple robe, indicating for the disciples to rise. Her figure was elegant under the crimson-purple satin, reflecting a faint purple glow under the morning sun. The disciples stood up and looked at Su Muxin. Her genderless beauty caused many of the female disciples in the square to reveal ripples of infatuation in their eyes. They wanted nothing more than to receive the sect master's favor. Su Muxin's gaze swept across the square, causing Du Xiaofu to immediately lower his head and retract his aura. "Let's postpone today's sect entrance ceremony and settle some other matters first." Su Muxin's hair was tied up in a high bun, and her long hair flowed down her back like flowing water. She smiled faintly, and that smile seemed to have a kind of beauty that didn't differentiate between gender. It was soul-stirring. Looking at the disciples in the square, Su Muxin continued, "Not long ago, something happened to the Ji family in Tianquan City. Hahuan School's disciple Xiang Qiran was crippled and Elder Min Ani was killed. Elder Xiang Huangshan and several other elders and protectors were also killed. This time, it was all done by someone called Fu Dabai." Before Su Muxin could finish speaking, the entire square was in an uproar. Who exactly is this Fu Dabai? The Hahuan School's disciples burst into an uproar as they exclaimed in surprise. Many of the Hahuan School's disciples knew that Elder Xiang Huangshan was a transcendent martial venerable expert. He had killed dozens of Hahuan School's experts in a row. This was a provocation to the Hahuan School. Right now, Fu Dabai has mixed in with the new disciples and is hiding in the Hahuan School. "All disciples, leave the square," Su Muxin said indifferently as her gaze landed on Du Xiaofu. "Fu Dabai is mixed in with them." Hearing this, the surrounding Hahuan School's disciples, both old and new, immediately retreated. This was Fu Dabai, someone who could even kill Elder Xiang Huangshan. How could they be a match for him? If they fought, the consequences would be unimaginable. Besides Su Muxin, Ji Jian's eyes darted around as she scanned the square. She was currently restrained and could not move at all. Phew! Du Xiaofu took a deep breath and did not retreat. He raised his head slightly, and a bitter smile appeared on his dust-covered face. Su Muxin from the Hahuan School must have known that he was in the Hahuan School. It was ridiculous that he was still hiding. All the Hahuan School's disciples in the square retreated in shock and panic. In the blink of an eye, Du Xiaofu was the only one left in the square. Swish, swish. In an instant, the gazes of everyone present fell onto Du Xiaofu, and many gazes were filled with astonishment. On the high platform, Su Muxin looked at Du Xiaofu. Looking at his face covered in dust, she did not know why, but she could not help but feel ripples in her heart. That is an ill-fated relationship. I should not have come to Tianhuang mainland. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. I said that if we meet again, I will not hold back. Why am I still feeling uneasy now? Su Muxin muttered to herself and frowned. She suppressed the ripples in her heart. She recognized the face covered in dust at once. She did not forget it at all. "It seems that you have been waiting for me here for a long time." Du Xiaofu spoke. He had already reached the worst point. He might as well not hold back anymore. With a shake of his long sleeve, he wiped the dust off his face and revealed his resolute and determined face. On the high platform, Ji Jian's eyes were fixed on Du Xiaofu. At this moment, her eyes were darting around rapidly, as if she wanted to say something. However, because of the restriction, she couldn't speak, and her body couldn't move. She could only be anxious. Something doesn't seem right. In the crowd, Zhou Renjie and Huang Ying, as well as Deacon Lu Chui, who was also on the square, looked at the young man who was facing off against their sect master. They were all astonished. They could clearly feel that something was wrong with what was happening. It was as if something had exceeded their expectations. "You have to pay the price for killing so many powerful people from Hahuan School," Su Muxin said in a clear voice. "They used their power to bully others and provoked me. What harm is there in killing them?" Du Xiaofu said as he looked at Su Muxin. "So you're that Fu Dabai. You'll definitely regret killing someone from my Fei clan today." As soon as Du Xiaofu's voice fell, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded. Whoosh whoosh. In an instant, more than 10 figures rushed onto the square from all directions. Boom! Powerful auras swept out and froze the square. There were several auras of martial honorables and 8-star spiritual talisman masters. Not far from Su Muxin, a gray-robed old woman in her 70s appeared out of thin air and landed in front of Du Xiaofu. She looked at Du Xiaofu with a sinister gaze. This was the old woman who had just spoken. "People from the Fei family? I didn't kill many of them. That vicious woman, Fei Ying, deserved to die." Du Xiaofu looked around and finally looked at the gray-robed old woman. Ha! Staring at Du Xiaofu with a sinister gaze, the gray-robed old woman was not angry. Instead, she laughed and said in a sinister voice, Good. How dare you kill people from the Fei family? Brat, you will regret it. No matter who you are, the Fei family will not let you off today. The Fei family is nothing. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly and looked at the gray-robed old woman. Since he had already been recognized, he had no other choice but to fight. It would not be easy to leave the Haohuan school, which was full of experts. However, Du Xiaofu did not care about the Fei family of the Haohuan school. He had the devil religion, legalism, and dragons. Below him were the ancient Fist sect, the divine light court, and other enemies. The Fei family was nowhere to be found. This sudden turn of events caused countless gazes to be filled with astonishment. Quite a number of disciples looked at each other in dismay. They were still unaware of what had happened. However, everyone was able to faintly sense that this matter was very serious, very serious. How arrogant! The gray-robed old woman raised her head slightly and looked at the disciples around her. She seemed to have realized that she had lost her composure. She laughed coldly and stretched out her withered hands. She said to Du Xiaofu coldly, "Since that is the case, I will give you two choices. Kill yourself and leave your corpse intact, or I will personally destroy your spiritual soul." Chapter 1176. Du Xiaofu shot a disdainful glance at the gray-clothed old woman. His voice was accompanied by profound energy as it reverberated through the plaza. "I'm afraid that you alone won't be enough. If you want to deal with me, I'm afraid that your Haohuan school can only get those grand elders and Su Muxin to take action." Arrogant brat. The gray-clothed old woman's eyes were filled with killing intent as she stared straight at Du Xiaofu. "There's no need to provoke me." Su Muxin stared straight at Du Xiaofu as her eyes rippled. It wasn't hard for anyone to understand the meaning behind Du Xiaofu's words. She said, "Don't worry, I don't need to take action to deal with you. There's also no need to alert the Manchues Grand Elders. If you can leave here alive today, I'll consider you capable." "Is that so?" Du Xiaofu slowly raised his head and looked around. A smile flashed across his resolute face. His smile was filled with arrogance. Finally, he looked at the gray-clothed old woman and said, "If the Fei family wants to take revenge on me, I'm afraid that with your peak transcendent martial honorable cultivation, you're not much stronger than Xiang Huangshan. You're not qualified." As Du Xiaofu's words fell, many of the Haohuan school's experts around the plaza were stunned. On the high platform, Su Muxin's eyes were quietly looking at the plaza. There were no more ripples in her eyes. "Fu Xiaodu, Fu Dabai. Who exactly is he? He's actually not afraid of Elder Fei. Was he really the one who killed Elder Xiang?" Zhou Renjie, Huang Ying, and Lu Chui, who had retreated far away, were all astonished. He. The Haohuan school's disciples in the plaza were all astonished. The old woman from the Fei family was stunned for a moment before she started laughing out of anger. For hundreds of years, she had helped the Fei family to stand tall and secure a place in Haohuan school. When had she ever been looked down upon by a junior like this? Everyone could feel the monstrous anger in the old woman's voice. Without a doubt, the peak transcendent martial Saint Fei clan's old woman was completely infuriated by Du Xiaofu. When he heard the Fei family old lady's laughter, Du Xiaofu remained unmoved. Both of his eyes stared at the Fei family old lady as a faint golden light flashed. Faintly, it seemed as if a golden-winged rock was about to emerge. Du Xiaofu didn't want to expose himself in Haohuan school. This was equivalent to putting himself in a desperate situation. However, his life had been saved by Ji Jian, and he had also obtained the hegemonic arts from the Ji family. Du Xiaofu couldn't turn a deaf ear to this and had to come. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was in Haohuan school. This was the headquarters of the Haohuan school. With so many people and so many experts, he was in a precarious situation. Du Xiaofu wasn't afraid of the peak transcendent martial saint from the Fei family. With his current cultivation, it wouldn't be much of a problem to kill her. Right now, Du Xiaofu's greatest worry was the encirclement of the Haohuan school and the hidden experts. Thus, he had used some superficial provocation at the beginning. Even if it was just Su Muxin, Du Xiaofu knew that it would be difficult for him to deal with her. Furthermore, the dignified Haohuan school was stronger than the 7-star hall when it was at its peak. Du Xiaofu would never believe that there weren't any martial domain realm cultivators or 9-star spiritual talisman masters. A strange look flashed across Du Xiaofu's eyes. Although his provocation wasn't very profound, it seemed to be the most effective at the moment. When she saw Du Xiaofu's expression, the Fei family old lady's face finally turned gloomy to the point of being distorted. Strange runes flickered on her withered palms. Traces of mysterious runes that caused one's heart to palpitate flickered like lightning. Chi! In the next instant, the Fei family old lady's figure seemed to have turned into a ghostly afterimage. Her withered palms formed hand seals at the same time, and a vast power froze the void. Boom! Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, the Fei family old lady's figure tore through space and appeared above Du Xiaofu's head in an instant. A resplendent light erupted like a blazing sun. "Brat, go to hell." Her voice was sinister. The Fei family old lady's final hand seal had already formed at lightning speed. Then, she clenched her withered palms. The vast and surging profound energy followed the energy of heaven and earth and transformed into a gigantic hand seal that was over 100 feet wide. The gigantic hand seal was covered with mysterious runes. When it descended, it directly sealed off all of Du Xiaofu's escape routes and directly enveloped Du Xiaofu. Everyone looked at each other in astonishment. At the same time, Du Xiaofu made his move. His clear eyes suddenly shone with a boundless golden light. Faint golden runes flickered on his skin. In that instant, an incomparably domineering aura suddenly spread out from his tall and straight body. His long robes fluttered, domineering and disdainful. Boom! The space of the plaza suddenly trembled violently. Du Xiaofu's feet fiercely stomped on the plaza. His strength rose from the ground and instantly, cracks appeared on the ground of the plaza. Oh! Everything was as fast as lightning. Instead of retreating, Du Xiaofu advanced. His terrifying aura soared into the sky like a peerless, ferocious beast. Suddenly, a golden fist condensed in his hand. Accompanied by the roar of a dragon and the long cry of a divine elephant, the fist collided with the enormous energy of that hand with an overbearing and disdainful momentum. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd around the plaza, the golden fist seal and the gigantic hand seal collided fiercely like meteorites. Instantly, a muffled sound that made one's soul tremble and scalp tingle resounded throughout the plaza. Rumble. A huge explosion of energy instantly resounded throughout the entire plaza and spread throughout the Hahuan school. Waves of terrifying runic waves spread out from the point of collision between the hand seal and the fist seal like raging waves. They exploded in all directions, and the cracks on the ground of the plaza spread into the distance like a spiderweb. Golden light shone brightly and strange runes swept out. This terrifying movement was like a volcanic eruption, causing one's heart to involuntarily tremble. Puff, puff! Tens of thousands of gazes watched as the two collided. In just a moment, a figure was directly sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Large mouthfuls of dark red blood were spat out, and finally landed heavily on the ground of the plaza 100 feet away. Crack, crack! The body smashed into the ground, causing the ground of the plaza to tremble. The plaza, which had been reinforced by the rune array, also began to crack. Tens of thousands of gazes hurriedly looked over. When they saw that the figure that had smashed into the ground like a bird with broken wings was actually Elder Fei, the gazes of the entire plaza immediately froze. In the hearts of the surrounding Hahuan school disciples, a wave of uncontrollable shock surged out from their hearts. Originally, there were more than 10 experts from the Fei family who had surrounded Du Xiaofu from all directions. At this moment, when they saw this sudden scene where a peak, transcendent martial honorable expert was unable to block a single move from the opponent, they all felt a chill run down their spines. On the high platform, the gazes of many experts from the Hahuan school couldn't help but fiercely tremble at this moment. Su Muxin frowned slightly. As the body of the old woman from the Fei family smashed into the ground, her eyes slightly raised. Puff, puff! The old woman from the Fei family was still spitting out blood. Her blood was mixed with her shattered internal organs. One of her withered hands was also dripping with blood from cracks. It was soft, as if her bones had been directly shattered. The 5 viscera and 6 bowels of the old woman's body had been directly shattered. Although she wasn't dead yet, she could be considered to be crippled. Du Xiaofu stood in the air at a low altitude. His body was glistening with golden light, and his eyes were like an ocean of golden light, overbearing and terrifying. That terrifying aura made people feel as if they were facing a tyrannical, ferocious bird. Those who were weaker felt their souls tremble. I've said it before. With your peak, transcendent, martial, honorable cultivation, you don't have the qualifications to touch me. A gloomy and sharp voice came out from Du Xiaofu's mouth. A strong wind fluctuated in the air, and the hair behind his head fluttered. His gaze was cold as he looked at the old woman from the Fei family, who was almost crippled. The eyes of the old woman from the Fei family trembled. Her distorted old face was filled with shock and fear, as well as some resentment. Demon King. He's the Demon King, Du Xiaofu. Suddenly, on the high platform, behind Su Muxin, a beautiful woman cried out in shock. Her expression and voice were as if she had seen a ghost, and it reverberated in the square. This beautiful woman had brought the disciples of the Hahuan school to the Tianhuang continent with Kai Yin. She had personally witnessed the terrifying savagery of the Demon King, Du Xiaofu. She had also heard of the Demon King Du Xiaofu's brutal deeds in the Tianhuang continent.